So the Speardanes in days gone by, and the kings who ruled them had courage and greatness. We have heard of those princes' heroic campaigns. They were as shields, chieftain, scourge of many tribes, archer of mead benches, rampaging among foes. This terror of the hall troops had come far. A foundling to start with, he would flourish later on as his powers waxed and his worth was proved. In the end, each clan on the outlying coasts beyond the Whale Road had to yield to him and begin to pay tribute. That was one good king. Afterwards, a boy child was born to shield, a cub in the yard, a comfort sent by God to the nation. He knew what they had sold, the long times and trouble they come through without a leader. So the Lord of life, the glorious Almighty, made this man renowned. Shield had father a famous son. Beowulf's name is known through the north, and a young prince must be prudent like that, giving freely while his father lives, so that afterwards in age, when fighting starts, steadfast companions will stand by him and hold the line. Behavior that's admired is the path to power among people everywhere. Shield was still thriving when his time came, and he crossed over into the Lord's keeping. His warrior band did what he bade them. When he laid down the law among the Danes, they shouldered him out to the sea's flood, the chief they revered who had long ruled them. A ring-rolled prow rode in the harbour, ice-clad, outbound, a craft for a prince. They stretched their beloved lord in his boat, laid out by the mast amidships the great ring river. Far-fetched treasures were piled upon him, and precious gear. I never heard before of a ship so well furbished with battle tackle, bladed weapons, and coats of mail. The mass treasure loaded on top of him. It would travel far on out unto the ocean's way. They decked his body no less bountifully with offerings than those first ones did who cast him away when he was a child, and launched him alone out over the waves. They set a gold standard up high above his head and let him drift to wind and tide, bewailing him and mourning their loss. No man can tell, no wise man in hall or withered veteran knows for certain who savaged that load. Then it fell to Beowulf to keep the forts. He was well regarded and ruled the Danes for a long time after his father took leave of his life on earth. Then his heir, the great Halfdane, held sway for as long as he lived. Their elder and warlord, he was 4 times a father, this fighter prince. One by one they entered the world. Hroga, Hrothgar, the good Helga, and a daughter, I have heard, who was Onella's queen, a balm in bed to the battle-scarred sweet. The fortunes of war favoured Hrothgar. Friends and kinsmen flocked to his ranks, young followers, a force that grew to be a mighty army. So his mind turned to hall building. He handed down orders for men to work on a great meat hall, meant to be a wonder of the world forever. It would be his throne room, and there he would dispense his God-given goods to young and old, but not the common land or people's lives. Far and wide through the world I have heard orders for work to adorn that wallstead were sent to many peoples, and soon it stood there, finished and ready in full view. The Hall of Halls, Herod was the name he had settled on it, whose utterance was law, nor did he gay, but told out rings and torques at the table. The hall towered, its gables wide and high and waiting, a barbarous burning. That doom abided, but in time it would come. The killer instinct leashed among in-laws, the blood less rampant. Then a powerful demon, a prowler through the dark, nursed a hard grievance. It harrowed him to hear the din of the loud banquet every day in the hall, the harp being struck and the clear song of the skilled poet, telling the mastery of man's beginnings, how the Almighty had made the earth a gleaming plain girdled with waters. In his splendor he set the sun and the moon to be earth's lamplight, lanterns for men, and filled the broad lap of the world with branches and leaves and quickened life in every other living thing that moved. So times were pleasant for the people there until finally one, a fiend out of hell, began to work his evil in the world. Grendel was the name of this grim demon, haunting the marshes, marauding around the heath and desolate fens. He had dwelt for a time in Israel among the banished monsters, Cain's clan, whom the Creator had outlawed and condemned as outcasts. For the killing of Abel, the Eternal Lord had exacted a price. Cain got no good for committing that murder, because the Almighty made him anathema. And out of the curse of his exile there sprang ogres and elves and evil phantoms, and the giants too, who strove with God time and again till he gave them their reward. So after nightfall, Grendel set out for the lofty house to see how the ring Danes were settling into it after their drink. There he came upon them, a company of the best asleep and a feasting, insensible to pain and human sorrow. Suddenly then the god-cursed brute was wreaking havoc, greedy and grim. He grabbed 30 men from their resting places and rushed to his lair, flushed up and inflamed from the raid, blundering back with butchered corpses. Then as dawn brightened and the day broke, Grendel's powers of distractions were plain. The wassail was over. They wept to heaven and mourned under mourning. The mighty prince, the storied leader, sat stricken and helpless, humiliated by the loss of his guard, bewildered and stunned, staring aghast at the demon's trail in deep distress. He was numb with grief, but got no respite. For one night later, merciless Grendel struck again, and with more gruesome murders. Malignant by nature, he never showed a remorse. It was easy then to meet with a man shifting himself to a safer distance, to bed in the balconies, for who could be blind to the evidence of his eyes, the obviousness of that hall watcher's hate? Whoever escaped kept a weathered eye open and moved away. So Grendel ruled in defiance of right, one against all, until the greatest house in the world stood empty, a deserted wallstead. For 12 winters, seasons of woe, the Lord of the Shieldings suffered under his load of sorrow, and so, before long, the news was known all over the world. Sad days were sung about the beset king. The vicious raids and ravages of Grendel, his long and unrelenting feud, nothing but how he would never parley or make peace with any Dane, nor stop his death-dealing, nor pay the death price. No counselor could ever expect fair reparation from those rabid hands. All were endangered, young and old, were hunted down by that dark death shadow. Who lurked and swooped in the long nights on the misty moors, nobody knows. For these ravens from hell roam on their errands. So Grendel waged his lonely war, inflicting constant cruelties on the people, atrocious hurt. He took over her Herod, haunted the glittering hall after dark. But the throne itself, the treasure seat, he was kept from approaching. He was the Lord's outcast. These were hard times, heartbreaking for the Prince of the Shieldings. Powerful counselors, the highest in the land, with blended advice, plotting how best the bold defenders might resist and beat off sudden attacks. Sometimes at pagan shrines they vowed offerings to idols, swore oaths, the killer of souls might come to their aid and save the people. That was their way. Their heathenish hope, deep in their hearts, they remembered hell. The almighty judge of good deeds and bad, the good Lord, head of the heavens and high king of the world, was unknown to them. Oh, cursed is he who in time of trouble has to thrust his soul into the fire's embrace, forfeiting help. He has nowhere to turn, but blessed is he who after death can approach the Lord and find friendship in the Father's embrace. So that troubled time continued, woe that never stopped, steady affliction for half day and some, too hard an ordeal. There was panic after dark. People endured raids in the night, driven by the terror, and heard about Grendel. Agalek slain was on home ground, over in Geatland. There was no one else like him alive. In his day, he was the mightiest man on earth, high-born and powerful. He ordered a boat that would ply the waves. He announced his plan, to sail the Swan's Road and search out that king, the famous prince who needed defenders. Nobody tried to keep him from going. No elder denied him, dear as he was to them. Instead, they inspected omens and spurred his ambition to go, while he moosed about like the leader he was, enlisting men the best he could find, with 14 others. The warrior boarded the boat as captain, a canny pilot along coast and currents. Time went by. The boat was on water, enclosed under the cliffs. Men climbed eagerly up the gangplank. Zen turned and served. Warriors loaded a cargo of weapons, shining war gear in the vessel's hold, then heaved out away with a well in their wood-weathered ship. Over the waves, with the wind behind her and foam at her neck, she flew like a bird, till her curved prow had covered the distance, and on the following day, at the due hour, the seafarers sighted land, sunlit cliffs, sheer crags, and loomed headlands. The landfall they sought. It was the end of their voyage, and the gates vaulted over the side, out onto the sand, and moored their ship. There was a clash of mail and a thresh of gear. They thanked God for that easy crossing on a calm sea. When a watchman on the wall, the shielding's lookout, whose job it was to guard the sea cliffs, saw shields glittering in the gangplank and battle equipment being unloaded, he had to find out who and what the arrivals were. So he rowed to shore, his horsemen on Hrothgar's, and challenged them in formal terms, flourishing his spear.
What kind of men are you who arrive rigged out for combat in coats of mail, sailing here over sea lanes in your steep-hulled boat? I have been stationed as lookout on this coast for a long time. My job is to watch the waves for raiders, any danger to the Danish shore. Never before has a force under arms disembarked so openly, not bothering to ask if the sentries allowed them safe passage or the clan had consented. Nor have I seen a mightier man-at-arms on this earth than the one standing here. Unless I am mistaken, he is truly noble. There is no mere hanger-on in a hero's armor. So now, before you fare inland as interlopers, I have to be informed but who you are and where you hail from. Outsiders from across the water, I say it again, the sooner you tell where you come from and why, the better.
The leader of the troop unlocked his war hoard. The distinguished one believed this answer.
We belong by birth to the Gate people, and we owe allegiance to Lord Haglich. In this day my father was a famous man, a noble warrior lord named Beowulf. He outlasted many a long winter and went on his way. All over the world, wise men and council continue to remember him. We come in good faith to find your lord, a nation's shield, the son of Halfdane. Give us the right advice and direction. We have arrived here on a great errand to the Lord of the Danes. I believe, therefore, should be nothing hidden or withheld between us. So tell us if what we have heard is true of this that, whatever it is, this danger abroad in the dark nights, this corpse-maker mongering death in the shielding's country, I come to proffer my wholehearted help and counsel. I can show the wise Hrothgar a way to defeat his enemy and find respite, if any respite is to reach him ever. I can calm the turmoil and terror in his mind. Otherwise, he must endure woes and live with grief for as long as his hull stands at the horizon on its high ground. Undaunted, sitting astride his horse, the Coast Guard answered, Anyone with gumption and a sharp mind will take the measure of two things, what's said and what's done. I believe what you have told me. You are a troop loyal to our king. So come ahead with your arms and your gear, and I will guide you. What's more, I'll order my own comrades on the word of honor to watch your boat down there on the strand to keep her safe in her fresh tar until the time comes for a curved prow to preen on the waves and bear this hero back to Geatland. May one so valiant and venturesome cut on him unharmed through the clash of battle.
So they went on their way. The ship rode the water, broad beam, bound by its hawser, and anchored fast. Boar shapes flashed above their cheat guards, brightly forged work of goldsmiths. Watching over these stern-faced men, they marched in step, hurrying on till the timbered hall rose before them, radiant with gold. Nobody on earth knew of another. Building like it, majesty lodged there. Its light shone over many lands, so their gallant escort guided them to that dazzling stronghold and indicated the shortest way to it. Then spoke the noble warrior, wheeled on his horse, and spoke these words.
It is time for me to go. May the Almighty Father keep you, and in his kindness watch over your exploits. I'm away to the sea, back on alert against enemy raiders.
It was a paved track, a path that kept them in marching order. The mouthshirts glinted hard and hand clinked. The high glass iron of their armour rang. So they duly arrived in their grim war graith in Gareth the Hall, and weary from the sea, stacked wide shields, the toughest hardwood against the wall. Then collapsed on the benches, battle dressed, and weapons clashed. They collected their spears, and the seafarers stook, a stand of greyish tapering ash, and the troops themselves were as good as their weapons. Then a proud warrior questioned men concerning their origins.
Where do you come from, carrying these decorated shields and sheds of mail? These cheeks, hinged helmets and javelins. I am Hrothgar's herald and officer. I have never seen so impressive or large and simply strangers, soundness of heart, bravery not banishment. Must have brought you to Hrothgar.
The man whose name was known for courage. The great Geat leader, resolute in his helmet, answered in return.
We are retainers from Hygelac's band. Beowulf is my name. If your lord and master, the most renowned son of Halfdane, will hear me out, and graciously allow me to greet him in person, I am ready and willing to report my errand.
Ulfgar replied, a Wendel chief, renowned as a warrior, well known for his wisdom and the temper of his mind.
I will take this message in accordance with your wish to our noble king, our dear friend, Lord, friend of the Danes, the giver of rings. I will go and ask him about your coming here, then hurry back and with whatever reply it pleases him to give.
With that he turned to where Hrothgar sat, an old man among retainers. The valiant follower stood foursquare in front of his king. He knew the courtesies. Ulfgar addressed his dear lord.
People from Geatland have pushed ashore. They've sailed far over the wide sea. They called chief in charge of their band by the name Beowulf. They beg, my lord, an audience with you. Exchange of words and formal greeting. Most gracious Hrothgar, do not refuse them, but grant them a reply. Their arms and appointment, they appear well born and worthy of respect, especially the one who has led them this far. He is formidable indeed.
Hrothgar, protector of the Shieldings, replied.
I used to know him when he was a young boy. His father before him was called Eckenflow. Ethel took gave Eckenflow his daughter in marriage. This man is their son, here to follow up an old friendship. A crew of seamen who had sailed for me once with a gift cargo across to Geatland returned with marvellous tales about him. A thane, they declared, with the strength of 30 in the grip of each hand. The Holy God has, in his goodness, guided him here to the West Danes to defend us from Grendel. This is my hope, and for his heroism I will recompense him with rich treasure. Go immediately, bid him and the Geats he has in attendance to assemble and enter. Say moreover, when you speak to them, they are welcome to Denmark.
At the door of the hall, Ulfgar duly delivered the message.
My lord, the conquering king of the Danes bids me announce that he knows your ancestry. Also that he welcomes you here to Herod and salutes your arrival from across the sea. You are free now to move forward to meet Hrothgar in helmets and armor, but shields will stay here and spears be stacked until the outcome of the audience is clear.
The hero rose, surrounded closely by his powerful thanes. A party remained under orders to keep watch on the arms. The rest proceeded, led by the prince under Herod's roof. And standing on the heath in webbed links that the smith had woven, the fine forged smith in his glinting mail shirt, resolute in his helmet, Beowulf spoke.
Greetings to Hrothgar. I am Hygelac's kinsman, one of his whole troop. When I was younger, I had great triumphs. The news of Grendel, hard to ignore, reached me at home. Sailors brought stories of the plight you suffer in this legendary hall. How it lies deserted, empty, and useless once the evening light hides itself under heaven's dome. So every elder and experienced councilman among my people supported my resolve to come to you, King Hrothgar, because all knew of my awesome strength. They'd see me bolted in the blood of enemies when I battled and bound 5 beasts, raided a throne nest, and in the night sea slaughtered seabirds. I have suffered extremes and avenged the gates. Their enemies brought it upon themselves. I devastated them. Now I mean to be a match for Grendel, said the outcome in single combat. And so my request, O King of Right Danes, dear Prince of the Shieldings, friend of the people, and the ring of defence, my one request is that you won't refuse me, who have come this far, the privilege of purifying Heorot with my own men to help me and nobody else. I have heard, moreover, that the monster scorns in his reckless way to use weapons. Therefore, to heighten Hygelac's fame and gladden his heart, I hereby renounce sword and the shelter of a broad shield. The heavy war board, hand to hand, is how it will be. Life and death fight with the fiend. Whichever one death fells must deem it a just judgment by God. If Grendel wins, it will be a gruesome day. He will glut himself on the gates in war horse, swoop without fear on that flower of manhood, as on others before. Then my face won't be there to be covered in death. He will carry me away as it goes to ground, gorged and bloodied. He will run gloating with my raw corpse and feed on it alone. No cruel frenzy fouling his moor nest. No need then to lament for long or lay out my body. For the battle takes me, send back this breast webbing that Wayland fashioned and Hrothgar gave me. To Lord Hygelac, fate goes ever as fate must. Hrothgar, the helmet of shielding, spoke. Beowulf, my friend, you have travelled here to favour us and to fight for us. There was a feud one time begun by your father. With his own hands he had killed Hrethlof, who was a wolf. So war was looming, and his people, in fear of it, forced him to leave. He came away, then over rolling waves to the South Danes, here, the sons of honor. I was then in the first flush of kinship, establishing my sway over all the rich strongholds of this heroic land. Herogar, my older brother and the better man, also a son of the half-Danes, had died. Finally, I healed the feud by paying. I shipped a treasure trove to the Wolfings, and they came to acknowledge me with oaths of alliance. It bothers me to burden anyone with all the grief Grendel has caused, and the havoc he has wreaked upon us in Heorot, our humiliations. My household guard are on the wane. Fate steps them away into Grendel's couches. But God can easily hold these raids and harrowing attacks. Time and again, when the goblets passed and seasoned fighters got flushed with beer, they would pledge themselves to protect Heorot and wait for Grendel with whetted swords. But when dawn broke and day crept in over each empty, blood-spattered bench, the floor of the meeting hall, where they had feasted, would be slick with slaughter. And so they died. Faithful retainers and my following dwindled. Now take your place at the table. Relish the triumph of heroes to your heart's content.
Then a bench was cleared in the banquet hall, so the Geats could have room to be together, and the party sat, proud in their bearing, strong and stalwart. An attendant stood by with a decorated pitcher, pouring bright helpings of meat, and the minstrel sang, filling Heorot with his head-clearing voice, gladdening that great rally of Geats and Danes. From roaring crash of the king's feet, Unferth, son of Ecglaf, spoke contrary words. Beowulf's coming, his sea-braving made him sick with envy. He could not brook or abide the fact that anyone else alive under heaven might enjoy greater regard than he did. You, Beowulf, who took on Breca in a swimming match on the open sea, risking the water just to prove that you could win. It was sheer vanity that made you venture out down the main deep, and no matter who tried, friend or foe, to deflect a pair of you, neither would back down. The sea test obsessed you.
You waded in, embracing water, taking its measure, mastering currents, riding on the swell. The ocean swayed, winter went wild in the waves, but you vied for 7 nights, and then he outswam you. He came ashore the stronger contender. He was cast up safe and sound one morning among the hither rims, but then made his way to where he belonged in the Boronding country, home again, sure of his ground in strong room and brawn. So Breca made good his boast upon you, and was proven right. No matter, therefore, how you may have fared in every battle until now, this time you'll be worsted. No one has ever outlasted an entire night against Grendel. Beowulf, Acanthor's son, replied, Well, friend Unferth, you have had your say about Breca and me, but it was mostly Bear that was doing talking. The truth is, the going was heavy in those highways. I was the strongest swimmer of all. We'd been children together, and we grew up daring ourselves to outdo each other, boasting and urging each other to risk our lives on the sea. So it turned out each of us swam holding a sword, a naked hard-proof blade for protection against the whale beasts. But Breca could never move farther or faster from me, so I could manage to move from him. Shoulder to shoulder, we struggled on for 5 nights, until the long foam pitch of the waves, the perishing cold night falling, and winds from the north drove us apart. The deep boiling boiled up, and its wallowing sent the sea brutes wild. My armor helped me hold out, my hard-ring chainmail hand-forged and linked. A fine, close-fitting filigree of gold kept me safe when some ocean creature pulled me to the bottom. Pinioned fast and swathed in its grip, I was granted one final chance. My sword plunged, and the ordeal was over. Through my hands, the fury battle had finished off the sea beast. Time and again foul things attacked me, lurking and stalking, but I lashed out, gave as good as I got with my sword. My flesh was not for feasting on. There would be no monsters gnawing and gloating over the banquet at the bottom of the sea. Instead, in the morning, mangled and sleeping in the sleep of the sword, they slopped and bloated like the ocean's leavings. From now on, sailors would be safe. The deep sea raids were over for good. Night came from the east, bright guidance of God, and the waves went quiet. I could see the headlands and buffeted cliffs. Often, for undaunted courage, fate spares the man it had not already marked. However it occurred, my sword had killed 9 sea monsters. Such night dangers and hard ordeals I have never heard of, nor a man more desolate than surging waves. But worn out as I was, I survived, came through with my life. The ocean lifted and laid me ashore. I landed safe on the coast of Finland. Now, I can all recall any fight you endured on Earth. That bears comparison. I don't boast when I say that neither you nor Breca were ever much celebrated for swordsmanship, for facing danger on the field of battle. You killed your own kith and kin, so for all your cleverness and quick tongue, you have suffered damnation in the depths of hell. The fact is, Unferth, if you were truly as keen or courageous as you claim to be, Grendel would never have gotten away with such unchecked atrocity. Attacks on your king, havoc in Herat, and horrors everywhere. But he knows he need never be in dread of your blade making a mizzle of his blood, or of vengeance arriving ever from this quarter, from the victory shieldings, the shoulderers of the spear. He knows he can trample you down, you Danes, to his heart content, humiliate and murder without fear or reprisal, but he will find me different. I will show him how I gauge shape to kill in the heat of battle. Then whoever wants may go bravely to mead, when morning light, scarfed in sun dazzle shines forth from the south and brings another daybreak to the world. Then the grey-haired treasure giver was glad, far famed in battle. The prince of bright Danes and keeper of his people counted on Beowulf, on the warrior's steadfastness and his word. The laughter started, the din got louder, and the crowd was happy. Wiltho came in, Hrothgar's queen, observing the courtesies, adorned in her gold. She graciously saluted the men in the hall, then handed the cup first to Hrothgar, their homeland's guardian, urging him to drink deep and enjoy it, because it was dear to them, and he drank it down like the warlord he was. With festive cheer, so the helming woman went on her rounds, queenly and dignified, decked out in rings, offering the gold tablet to all ranks,
treating the household and the assembled troop until Louis Beowulf came from her hand. With a measured word, she welcomed the Geat and thanked God for granting her wish that the deliverer she could believe in would arrive to ease their afflictions. He accepted the cup, a daunting man, dangerous in action, but eager for it always. He addressed Beowulf, Beowulf, son of Beowulf, said, I've had purpose when I put to sea. As I said in the bolt of my abandonment, I meant to perform to the uttermost what your people wanted, or perish in the attempt in the beast's clutches. And I shall fulfill that purpose, prove myself with a proud deed, or meet my death here in the mead hall. This former boast by Beowulf the Great, the Geat, pleased the lady well, and she went to sit by Hrothgar, regal and arrayed with gold. Then was like old times in the echoing hall, proud talk and people happy, loud and excited until soon enough Halfdane's heir had to be away to his night's rest. He realized that the demon was going to descend on the hall, that it plotted all day, from dawn night until darkness gathered again over the world. Its city night shapes came stealing forth under the cloud murk. The company stood as two leaders took leave of each other. Hrothgar wished Beowulf health and good luck, named him Hallwarden, and announced as follows. Never since my hand could hold the shield have I entrusted or given control of the Danes' hall to anyone but you. Ward and guard it, for it is the greatest of houses. Be on your mettle now. Keep in mind your fame. Beware of the enemy. There's nothing you wish for that won't be yours if you went through alive. Hrothgar departed then with his house guard. The lord of the Shieldings, their shelter in war, left the mead hall to lie with Beowulf, his queen and bedmate. The king of glory, as people learned, had posted a lookout, who was a match for Grendel, a guard against monsters, such special protection to the Danish prince. And the Geat placed complete trust in his strength of limb in the Lord's favour. He began to remove his iron breastmail, took off the helmet, handed his attendant the patterned sword, a smith's masterpiece, ordering him to keep the equipment guarded. And before he bed it down, Beowulf, the Prince of Goodness, proudly asserted, when it comes to fight, I did not count myself as dangerous as any day as Grendel, so I won't be a cutting edge I'll wield, and mow him down easily as I might. He has no idea of the arts of war, of shield or swordplay, though it does possess a wild strength, no weapons, therefore, for either this night. Unarmed he shall face me, if face me he dares, and may the divine Lord in his wisdom grant the glory of victory to whichever side he see fit. Then down brave man lay, with his bolster under his head, and his whole company of sea rovers at rest behind him. None of them expected he would ever see his homeland again, or get back to his native people, and the place who reared him. They knew too well the way it was before, how often the Danes would fall prey to death in the mead hall. But the Lord was weaving a victory on his war loom for the weather Geats. Through the strength of one they all prevailed. They would crush their enemy and come through in triumph and gladness. The truth is clear. Almighty God rules over mankind, and always has. Then out of the night came the shadow stalker, stealthy and swift. The hall guards were slack, asleep at their posts, all except one. It was widely understood that as long as God disallowed it, the fiend could not bear them into his shadow born. One man, however, was in a fighting mood, awake and on edge, spoiling for action. In off the moors, down through the mistbands, God-crushed Grendel came greedily lopping. The bane of the race of men roamed forth hunting for prey in the high hall. Under the cloud murk he moved towards it, until it shone above him, a sheer keep of fortified gold. Now, nor was that the first time he had scouted the ground of Hrothgar's dwelling, although never in his life, before or since, did he find harder fortune or hall defenders. Spurned and joyless, he journeyed on ahead, and arrived at the barn. The iron-braced door turned on its hinge when his hands touched it. Then his rage boiled over. He ripped open the mouth of the building, maddening for blood, pacing the length of the patterned floor with a loathsome tread, while baleful light, flame more than light, flared from his eyes. He saw many men in the mansion, sleeping. A ringed company of kinsmen and warriors quartered together, and his glee was demonic, picturing the mayhem. Before morning he would rip life from them and devour them, feed on their flesh. But his fate that night was due to change. His days of ravening had come to an end. Mighty and canning, Hagelac's kinsman was keenly watching for the first move the monster would make. Nor did the creature keep him waiting, but struck suddenly and started in. He grabbed and mauled a man on his bench, bit into his bone wrappings, bolted down his blood, and gorged on him in lumps, leaving the body utterly lifeless, eaten up hand and foot. Venturing closer, his talon was raised to attack Beowulf, where he lay on the bed, his bearing with open claw. When the alert heroes come back, an arm lock forestalled him utterly. The captain of evil discovered himself in the hand grip harder than anything he had ever encountered in any man on the face of the earth. Every bone in his body quailed and recoiled, but he could not escape. He was desperate to flee his den and hide with the devil's litter, for in all his days he had never been clammed or cornered like this. And Hagelac's trusty retainer recalled his bedtime speech, sprang to his feet, and got a firm hold. Fingers were bursting, the monster backtracking, the man overpowering. The dread of land was desperate to escape, to take the roundabout road and flee to his lair in the fens. Latching power in his fingers weakened. It was the worst trip the terrormonger had taken to Heorot. Now the timbers trembled and sang a hall session that Heorot every day inside the stockade. Stumbling in fury, the two contenders crashed through the building. The hall clattered and hammered, somehow survived the onslaught and kept standing. It was handsomely structured, a sturdy frame braced with the best of blacksmith's work inside and out. The story goes that as the pair struggled, mead benches were smashed and sprung off the floor, gold fitting as well. Before then, no shielding elder would believe there was any power or person on earth capable of wrecking the whole rigged hall, unless the burning embers of a fire engulfed it in flame. Then an extraordinary wail arose, and bewildering fear came over the Danes. Everyone felt it, heard that cry as it echoed off the wall, the god-cursed scream and strain of catastrophe, the howl of the loser, the lament of the hell serf, and keening his wound. He was overwhelmed, medical type by the man who of all men was foremost and strongest in the days of his life. But the Earl's troop leader was not inclined to allow his colour to depart alive. He did not consider that life of much account to anyone anywhere. Time and again Beowulf's warriors worked to defend their lord's life, laying about them the best they could with their ancestral blades, stalwart in action. They kept striking out on every side, seeking to cut straight to the soul. When they joined the struggle, there was something they could not have known at the time. The no blade on earth, no blacksmith's art, could ever damage their demon opponent. He had conjured the harm from the cutting edge of every weapon, but his going way out of this world and the days of his life would be agony to him, and his alien spirit would travel far into fiend's keeping. Then he, who had harrowed the hearts of men with pain and affliction in former times, had given offence also to God, found that his bodily powers failed him. Hagelac's kinsman kept him helplessly locked in the hand grip. As long as either lived, he was hateful to the other. The monster's whole body was in pain. A tremendous wound appeared on his shoulder. Sinews split and the bone lappings burst. Beowulf was granted the glory of winning. Grendel was driven under the fen banks, fatally hurt, to his desolate lair. His days were numbered. The end of his life was coming over him. He knew it for certain. And one bloody clash had fulfilled the dearest wish of the Danes. The man who lately landed among them, proud and sure, had purged the hall, kept it from harm. He was happy with his night work and the courage he had shown. The geek captain had boldly fulfilled his boast to the Danes. He had healed and relieved a huge distress, unremitting humiliations, the hard fate they had been forced to undergo, no small affliction. Clear proof of this could be seen in the hand the hero displayed, high up near the roof. The whole of Grendel's shoulder and arm, his awesome grasp. The morning came, and many a warrior gathered, as I've heard, around the gift hall, clan chiefs flocking from far and near, down wide-ranging roads, wondering greatly at the monster's footprints. His fatal departure was regretted by no one who witnessed his trail. Then got in his markers of his flight, where he had sulked away, exhausted in spirit and beaten in battle, bloodying the path, hauling his doom to the demon's mire. The bloodshot water wallowed and surged. There were loathsome upthrows and overturnings of waves and gore and wound slurry. With his death upon him, he dived deep into his marshton, drowned out his life and his heathen soul, hell claimed him there. Then away they rode, the old retainers, with many a young man following after him, a troop on horseback, in high spirits, on their bay steeds. Beowulf's doings were praised over and over again. Nowhere they said north or south, between the two seas, or under the tall sky, on the broad earth, was there anyone better to raise a shield or to rule a kingdom? Yet there was no laying of blame on their lord, the noble Hrothgar. He was a good king. At times the war band broke into a gallop, letting their chestnut horse race. Wherever they found the going good on those well-known tracks, meanwhile a thane of the king's household, a carrier of tales, a traditional singer deeply schooled in the lore of the past, linked a new theme to a strict meter. The man stated and recited with skill, rehearsing Beowulf's triumphs and feats in well-fashioned lines, entwining his words. He told what he had learned, repeated in songs about Sigmund's exploits, all of those many feats and marvels, the struggles and wanderings of Wales' son, things unknown to anyone. Except to Fitilla, feuds and foul doings confided by uncle to nephew when he felt the urge to speak of them. Always they had been partners in the fight, friends in need. They killed giants, their conquering swords had brought them down. After his death, Sigmund's glory grew because of his courage when he killed the dragon, guardian of the horde. Under Greystone he dared to enter all by himself, to face the worst without Fitilla, but it comes to pass. Sword plunged through those radiant scales and drove into the wall. The dragon died of it, his daring and gift and total possession of the treasure hoard. His are disposed of however he liked. He loaded the bolt with a sun and wedded her hold with dazzling spoils. The hard dragon melted. Sigmund's name was known everywhere. He was utterly valiant and venturesome, a fence round his fighters and forest therefore. After King Hermann's prowess declined and his champion sold down, the king was betrayed, ambition Jutland, overpowered and done away with. The waves of his grief had beaten him down, made him a burden, a source of anxiety to his own nobles. The expedition was often condemned in those earlier times experienced by men who relied on his lordship for redress, who presumed that the part of a prince was to thrive on his father's throne and defend the nation, shielding the land where they lived and belonged, holding in strongholds. Such was Beowulf in the affections of his friends, of everyone alive. But evil entered in her mind. Meanwhile, the Danes kept racing their mounts down steady, sandy lanes. The light of day broke and kept brightening. Bands of retainers galloped in excitement to the gabled hall to see the marvel, and the king himself, guardian of the ring hoard, goodness in person, walked in majesty from the women's quarters with a numerous train, attended by his queen and her crowd of maidens, across to the mead hall. When Hrothgar arrived at the hall, he spoke, standing on the steps under the steep eaves, gazing at the roofwork and Grendel's talent. First and foremost, let the Almighty Father be thanked for the sight. I suffered a long and harrowing by Grendel, but the Heavenly Shepherd can work his wonders always and everywhere.
Not long since, it seems, I would never be granted the slightest solace or relief from any of my burdens. The best of houses glittered and reeked and ran with blood. This one worry outweighed all others, a constant distress to counselors entrusted with deafening the people's thoughts from assault by monsters and demons. But now a man with the Lord's assistance has accomplished something none of us could manage before now for all our efforts. Whoever she was who brought forth this flower of manhood, if she is still alive, that woman can say that in her labor the Lord of ages bestowed a grace upon her. So now, Beowulf, I adopt you in my heart as a dear son. Nourish and maintain this new connection, you noblest of men, and there'll be nothing of want for no worldly goods that won't be yours. I have often honored smaller achievements, recognized warriors not nearly as worthy, lavish rewards on the less deserving. But you have made yourself immortal by your glorious action. May the God of ages continue to keep and requite you well.
Beowulf, son of Beowulf, spake.
We have gone through with a glorious endeavour, and been much favoured in this fight. We dared against the unknown. Nevertheless, if you could have seen the monster himself where he lay beaten, I would have been better pleased. My plan was to pounce, pin him down in a tight grip, and grapple him to death. Leave him panting for life, powerless, and clasped in my bare hands, his body in thrall. But I couldn't stop him from slipping from my hold. The Lord allowed it. My luck on him wasn't strong enough. He struggled fiercely and broke and ran. Yet he bought his freedom at a high price, for he left his hand and arm and shoulder to show he had been here. A cold comfort for having come among us, and now he won't be long for this world. He has done his worst, but the wound will end him. He has hasped and whooped and hurtling with pain, limping and looped in it. Like a man outlawed for wickedness, he must await the mighty judgment of God and majesty.
There was less tampering and big talk then on Firth the Buster, less of his blather, as the whole thing's eyed the awful proof of the hero's prowess. The splayed hand up under the eaves, every nail, claw, scale, and spur, every spike and welt on the hand of that heathen brute was like barbed steel. Everybody said there was no honed iron hard enough to pierce him through, no time-proofed blade that could cut his brutal, blood-caked claw. When the order was given for all hands to help refurbish, I wrote immediately. Men and women thronging the Whitehall, getting it ready. Gold thread shone in wall hangings, woven scenes that attracted and held the eye's attention. But iron braced as the inside of it had been, that bright room lay in ruins now. The very doors had been dragged from their hinges, only the roof remained unscathed. By the time the guilt-fouled fiend turned tail in despair of his life, but death is not easily escaped from by anyone. All of us with souls, earth dwellers, and children of men, must make our way to a destination already ordained, where the body, after the banqueting, sleeps on its deathbed. Then the due time arrived for Halfdane's son to proceed to the hall. The king himself would sit down to feast. No group ever gathered in greater numbers, or better order around the ring-giver. The benches filled with famous men, who fell to with relish. Round upon round of mead was passed. His powerful kinsmen, Hrothgar and Hrothulf, were in high spirits in the raftered hall. Inside her wrote there was nothing but friendship. The shielding nation was not yet familiar with feud and betrayal. Then Halfdane's son presented Beowulf with a gold standard as a victory gift, an embroidered banner, also breastmail and helmet, and a sword carried high. That both precious object and a token of honor. So Beowulf drank his drink at ease. He was hardly ashamed to be charged with such gifts in front of the hall troops. There haven't been many moments, I am sure, when men exchanged for such treasures at so friendly a sitting. An embossed ridge, a band lapped with wire, arched over the helmet, head protection to keep the keen ground cutting edge from damaging it when danger threatened, and the man was battling behind his shield. Next, the king ordered 8 horses with gold fetters to be brought through the yard into the hall. The harnesses of one included a saddle of sumptuous design. The battle seat, where the son of Halfdane rode, when he wished to join the swordplay, whenever the killing and carnage were the worst. He would be to the fore fighting hard, and the Danish prince, descendant of the king, handed over both the arms and the horses, urging Beowulf to use them as well. And so their leader, the lord and guard of copper and strong with customary grace bestowed upon Beowulf both set of gifts. A fair witness can see how well each one behaved. The chieftain went on to reward the others. Each man on the bench who sailed with Beowulf and risked the voyage received a bounty. Some treasured possession and compensation of price in gold was settled for the geek Grendel, had cruelly killed early, as he would have killed more, had not mindful God and one man's daring prevented that doom. Past and present, God's will prevails. Hence, understanding is always best, and a prudent mind, however remains for long here in this earthly life, will enjoy and endure more than enough. They sang and then played to please the hero. Words and music for their warrior prince, harp tunes and tales of adventure. There were high times on the hall benches, and the king's pope performed his part. With the saga of Finn and his sons, unfolding the tale of fierce attack in Friesland, where Hrungnef, king of the Danes, met death. Hildenberg had little cause to credit the Jutes, son and brother she lost them both on the battlefield. She bereft and blameless, safe, foredoomed, cut down the spear god. She, the woman, in shock waylaid by grief, Hawksdaughter, how could she not lament her fate when morning came, and the light broke on her murdered dears, and so farewell delight on earth. War carried away Finn's troop of thanes, all but a few. How could Finn hold the line or fight on to the end of the contest? How save the rump of his force from that enemy chief? So truth was offered as follows first, separate quarters to be cleared for the Danes, all and throne to be shared with the presents. Then second every day at the door, out of Giswin's son of Falkwold should honor the Danes bestow with an even hand to Angus men with wrought gold rings, bounty to match the measure he gave his own free sons, to keep morale and the beer hall high. Both sides sends at their agreement, at the oaths to Angus Finn swore openly, solemnly, that the battle survivors be guaranteed honors and status. No infringement by word or deed, no provocation will be permitted. Honoring giver after all was dead and gone, they were leaderless, enforced allegiance to his murder. So if any Frisian stirred bad blood with insinuations or taunts about this, the blade of the sword betrayed it. A funeral pyre was then prepared, the flint and gold from the hoard. The pride and prince of shields lay awaiting the flame. Everywhere there were blood pastors, coats of mail. The pyre was heaped with borscht helmets forged in gold, with gashed corpses of well-born Danes. Many had fallen. Then Hildenberg ordered her own son's body to be burnt with an ass, the flesh and bones to sputter and blaze beside his uncle's. The woman wailed and sang, Cain's warrior went up. Carcass flames swirled and fumed, they strode around the burial mound, and held his heads melted, crossed, gashes spattered and ran bloody mad.
like a lantern element flamed and consumed the dead of both sides. The greatest were gone, warriors scattered to homes and forth over Friesland. Few were now feeling the loss of friends, and you stayed and lived out that whole resentful blood, solemn with winter within. Homesick and helpless, no ringed world proud would up then and away on the sea. Wind and water raged with storms, wave and shingles were shackled and ice, till another year appeared in the yard, and as it does to this day, the season's constant, the winter of life coming over us. Then winter was gone, its life grew lovely, long he woke in the cooped up exile for a voyage home. But more for vengeance some way bringing things to a head. His storm-horn hankered to greet the Jews, so he did not balk once. Unloving placed on his lap, dazzled the duel, the best sword of all, whose edge his Jews knew only too well. Thus blood spilled the gallant Finn, slayed in his home out of Gotha and Oslo. From their voyage made in old accusation, brutish hand, but the fate they'd suffer all blamed on Finn. The wilderness in them had to bring over their horror, the blood of enemies. Finn was cut down, the queen brought away, and everything the Scyldings could find inside walls of the freezing kings. Gold collars and gems were swept off to the ship. Over sea lanes and back to England, the warrior troop bore that lady home. The poem was over. The poet had performed. A pleasant murmur started on the benches. Stewards did the rounds with wine and splendid jugs. And Otho came to sit in her gold crown between two good men, uncle and nephew, each of whom stood trusted the other. And the forthright Unferth, admired by all for his mind and courage, although under a cloud for killing his brothers, reclined near the king. The queen spoke. Enjoy this drink, my most generous lord. Raise up your goblet, entertain the Geats dully and gently. Discourse with them, and be open-handed, happy and fond. Relish your company, but recollect as well all the boons that have been bestowed on you. The bright court of Herod has been cleansed, and now the word is that you want to adopt this warrior as a son. So while you may bask in your fortune and the bequeathed kingdom and nation to your kith and kin, before you decease, I am certain Otho, he is noble and will use the young ones well. He will not let you down. Should you die before him, he will treat our children truly and fairly. He will honour, I am sure, our two sons, repay them in kind when he recollects all the good things we gave him once, the favour and respect he found in his childhood. She turned then to the bench where a boy sat, Rethric and Rothmund, his other noble sons, all the youth together, and that good man Beowulf the Geat sat between the brothers. The cup was carried to him, kind words spoken in welcome, and a wealth of wrought gold graciously bestowed, 2 arm bangles, a most shirt and rings, and the most resplendent torque of gold I ever heard tell of anywhere on earth or under heaven. There was no hoard like it since Hama snatched the brushing's neck chain and bore it away with its gems and settings to a shining fort away from Menric's wiles and hatred, and thereby ensured his eternal reward. Hagalak the Geat, grandson of his worthing, wore this neck ring on his last raid. At bay under his banner he defended the booty, treasure he had won. Fate swept him away because his proud need to provoke a feud with the Frisians. He fell beneath his shield. In the gem-encrusted kingly gear he had worn when he crossed the frothing wave bat. So the king fell into Frankish hands. They took his breastmail, also his neck torque, and punier warriors plundered the slain when carnage ended. Geat corpses covered the field.
Applause filled the hall. Then Withenville pronounced the presence of company. Take delight in this talk, dear Beowulf. Wear for luck. I wear also this mail from our people's armory. May you prosper in them. Be acclaimed for strength, for kindly guidance to these two boys, and your bounty will be sure. You have won renown. You are known to all men, far and near, now and forever. Your sway is wide as the wind's home, as the sea round the cliffs. And so, my prince, I wish you a lifetime's luck and blessings to enjoy this treasure. Treat my sons with tender care, be strong and kind. Here each comrade is true to the other, loyal to Lord, loving in spirit. The things have one purpose, the people are ready. Having drunk and pledged the rings, do as I bid. She moved then to her place. Men were drinking wine at that rare feast. How could they know fate, the grim shape of things to come? The threat looming over many things as night approached and King Hrothgar prepared to retire to his quarters. Retainers in great numbers were posted on guard, as so often in the past. Benches were pushed back, bedding gear and bolsters spread across the floor. One man lay down to his rest, already marked for death. At their heads they placed their polished timber battle shields, and on the bench above them each man's kit was kept to hand. A towering war helmet, red mail shirt, and great shafted spear. It was their habit, always and everywhere, to be ready for action, at home or in the camp, whichever case and whatever time the need arose. To rally round their lord, they were a right people. They went to sleep, one paid dearly for his night's ease, as had happened to them often, ever since Grendel occupied the Gold Hall, committing evil until the end came, death after his crimes. Then it became clear, obvious to everyone once the fight was over, that an avenger lurked and was still alive, grimming, biding time. Grendel's mother, monstrous hellbride, brooded on her wrongs. She had been forced down into fearful waters, the cold depths, after Cain had killed his father's son, fell his own brother with a sword. Branded an outlaw, marked by having murdered, he moved into the wilds, shunned company and joy, and from Cain there sprang misbegotten spirits, among them Grendel, the banished and accursed, due to come to grips with that watcher in her rod, waiting to do battle. The monster wrenched and wrestled with him, but Beowulf was mindful of his mighty strength, the wondrous gifts God had showered on him. He relied for help on the Lord of all, on his care and favour. So he overcame the foe, brought down the hell-brute, broken and bowed outcast from all sweetness, the enemy of mankind made for his death den. Now his mother had sallied forth on a savage journey, grief-racked and ravenous, desperate for revenge. She came to Herod, there, inside the hall, Danes lay asleep, earls, who would soon endure a great reversal. Once Grendel's mother attacked and injured, her onslaught was less only by as much as an Amazon warrior's strength is less than an armed man's when the hefted sword, its hammered edge and gleaming blade slathered in blood, raises the sturdy boar ridge off a helmet. Then in the hall, hard-honed swords were grabbed from the bench, many a broad shield lifted and braced. There was little thought of helmets or woven mail when they woke in terror. The held dam was in panic, desperate to get out. In mortal terror, the moment she was found, she had pounced and taken one of the retainers in tight hold, and headed for the fen. To Hrothgar, this man was the most beloved of friends. He trusted between the two seas. She had done away with a great warrior, ambushed him at rest. Beowulf was elsewhere. Earlier, after the award of the treasure, the Geat had been given another lodging. There was an uproar in her hut. She had snatched her trophy, Grendel's bloodied hand. His fresh blow to the averted bond. The bargain was hard, both parties having to pay for the lives of friends. The old grey-haired warrior was heartsore, weary, and heard the news. His highest placed advisor, his dearest companion, was dead and gone. Beowulf was quickly brought to the chamber. The winner of fights, the arch-warrior, came first footing in with his fellow troops, to where the king in his wisdom waited. still wondering whether Almighty God would ever turn the tide of his misfortunes. So Beowulf entered with his band in attendance, and the wooden floorboards banged and rang as he advanced, hurrying to address the Prince of the Englands, asking if he rested since the urgent summons had come as a surprise. Then Hrothgar, the shielding's helmet, spoke. Rest.
What is rest? Sorrow has returned. Alas for the Danes. Urshamir is dead. This Jordan laughs as the brother, a soulmate to me, a true mentor, my right hand man when the ranks clashed and Orc has had to think about it in a line of action. Ishashar was everything the world admires in a wise man and a friend. Then this roaming killer came in a fury and slaughtered him in her hut. Where she's hiding, glutting on the corpse, glorying in her escape, I cannot tell. She's taken up the feud because of last night when you killed Grendel, wrestled and racked him in ruinous combat, since for too long he had terrorized us with his depredations. He died in battle, paid with his life, and now this powerful other will arise, as force or evil, driven to avenge or complete that. So it seems to things in their grief, the anguish of everything endures at the loss of a ring. Now the hand that besought him so richly has been stayed to death. I've heard it said by my people in hall of councillors who live in upland country that they have seen two such creatures prowling moors, huge marauders from some other world. One of these things, as far as anyone ever can discern, looks like a woman, the other warped in the shape of a man, moves beyond the pale, bigger than any man, an unnatural birth called Grendel by country people in former days. They are fatherless creatures, and their whole ancestry is hidden in a past of demons and ghosts. They dwell apart among wolves on the hills, on wind-swept crags and treacherous caches, where cold streams pour down the mountain and disappear under mist and moorland. A few miles from here, a frost-stiffened wood awaits and keeps watch above Almere. The overhanging bank is a maze of tree roots mirrored in its surface. At night there's something uncanny happens. The water burns. And the mere bottom has never been surrounded by the sons of men. On its bank, the heather stepper halts. The hart in flight from pursuing hounds will turn to face him with firm set horns and die in the wood rather than dive beneath the surface. That is no good place. When wind blows up and stormy weather makes clouds scud and the skies weep, like a big step that doesn't serve pitch towards the heavens. Now help depends on you and you alone. The gap of danger where the demon waits is still unknown to you. Seek it if you dare. I will compensate you for settling the feud, as I did the last time with lavish wealth. Coffers of coiled gold, if you come back. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke. Well, sir, do not grieve. It is always better to avenge dear ones than indulge in mourning. For every one of us living in this world means to await our end. Let whoever can win this glory before death. When the warrior is gone, that will be his best and only bulwark. So rise, my lord, and let us immediately set forth on the trail others told them. I guarantee you she will not get away, not to den underground upland groves, nor the ocean floor. She'll have nowhere to flee to. Endure your troubles today, bear up, and be the man I expect you to be. With that, the old lord sprang to his feet and praised God for Beowulf's pledge. Then a bitten halter were brought for his horse with the plaited mane. The wise king mounted the royal saddle and rode out in style with a force of shield bearers. The forest paths were marked all over with the monster's tracks, her trail on the ground wherever she had gone across dark moors, dragging away the body of that Thane, Hrothgar's best counsellor and overseer of the country.
So the noble prince proceeded undismayed upon fells and screes, upon narrow footpaths and ways where they were forced into single file, ledges on cliffs above layers and water monsters. He went in front with a few men, good judges of the lie of the land, and suddenly discovered the dismal wood. Mountain trees growing out at an angle above grey stones, the bloodshot water surged underneath. There was a sword below to all Danes, friend of the shieldings, to hurt each and every one of that noble company, and they came upon Ashir's head at the foot of the cliff. Everybody gazed as the hot gore kept boiling up, and an urgent war horn repeated its notes. The whole party sat down to watch. The water was infested with all kinds of serpents. There were writhing sea dragons and monsters lodging on the slopes by the cliff, serpents and wild things such as those that often surface at dawn to roam the sail road and doom the voyage. Down they plunged, lashing in anger at the loud call of the battle bugle. An arrow from the bow of the Geat chief got one of them as he surged to the surface. The seasoned shaft so deep in his flank, and his freedom in the water got less and less. It was his last swim. He was swiftly overwhelmed in the shallows, prodded by barbed boar spears, cornered, beaten, pulled up on the bank. A strange lake birth, a loathsome catch. Men gazed at in awe. Beowulf got ready, donned his war gear, indifferent to death. His mighty hand forged fine-whipped mail would soon meet with the menace under water. It would keep the bone cage of his body safe. No enemy clasp could crush him in it. No vicious arm lock choke his life out. To guard his head, he had a glittering helmet that was due to be muddied on the mere bottom and blurred in the upswirl. It was of beaten gold, princely headgear, hooped and hasped by a weaponsmith who had worked wonders in days gone by, and adorned it with boar shapes. Since then, it had resisted every sword. And another item lent by Unferth at that moment of need was of no small importance. The Brehon handed him a hilted weapon, a rare and ancient sword named Hranding. The iron blade with its ill-boding patterns had been tempered in blood. It never failed the hand of anyone who hefted it in battle, anyone who had fought and faced the worst in the gasp of danger. This was not the first time it had been called to perform heroic feats. He lent the blade to the better swordsman, Unferth, the strong built of a clef, could hardly have remembered the ranting speech he had made in his cups. He was not man enough to face the turmoil of a fight underwater and risk to his life. So there he lost fame and repute. It was different for the other, rigged out in his gear. Beowulf, some Melcholo spoke. What is this of kings? Now that I have come to the point of action, I ask you to recall what we had said earlier, that you, son of Halfdane, and good friend to retainers, that you, if I should fall and suffer death while serving on your cause, would act like a father to me afterwards. If this combat kills me, take care of my young company, my comrades in arms. Be sure also, my beloved Hrothgar, you shall not neglect the treasures I have received. Let the Lord of the Geese gaze on the gold. Let Hrothgar's son take note of it and see that I have found a ring giver of rare magnificence, and enjoy the good of his generosity. And Unferth, it is to have what I inherited. To that far-famed man I bequeath my own sharp-honed, weave-sheened wonder blade. With Hranding I shall gain glory or die. After these words, the prince of the Weather Geats was impatient to be away and plunged suddenly. Without more ado, he dived into the heaving depths of the lake. It was the best part of a day before he could see the solid bottom. Quickly, the one who haunts those water, who scavenged and gone her gluttonous rounds for 100 seasons, sensed a human observing her outlandish lair from above. So she lunged and clutched and managed to catch him in her brutal grip, but his body, for all that, remained unscathed. The mesh of the chainmail saved him from on the outside. Her savage talons failed to rip the web of his war shirt. The once she touched bottom, that wolfish swimmer carried the ring-mailed prince to her court, so that for all his courage he could never use the weapons he carried. And a bewildering horde came at him from the depths, droves of sea beasts who attacked with tusks and tore his chainmail in a ghastly onslaught. The gallant man could see he entered some hellish turnhole, and yet the water did not work against him, because the hall roofing held off the force of the current. Then he saw firelight, a gleam and flare up, a glimmer of brightness. The hero observed that swamp thing from hell, the Tarn hag in her terrible strength, then heaved his war sword and swung his arm. The decorated blade came down, ringing and singing on her head, but soon he found his battle torch extinguished. The shining blade refused to bite. It spared her and failed the man in his need. It had gone through many hand-to-hand fights, had hewed the armor and helmets of the doomed, but here at last the fabulous power of the heirloom failed. Agla's kinsman kept thinking about his name and fame. He never lost heart. Then, in a fury, he flung his sword away. The keen inlaid, warm blue patterned steel was hurled to the ground. He would have to rely on the might of his arm. So must a man do who intends to gain enduring glory in a combat. Life doesn't cost him a thought. When the Prince of War Geats, warming to this fight, with Grendel's mother, gripped her shoulder and laid about him in a bandle frenzy, he pitched his killer opponent to the floor, but she rose quickly and retaliated, gripped him tightly in a grim embrace. The sure-footed fighter felt daunted. The strongest of warriors stumbled and fell. So she pounced upon him and pulled out a broad whetting knife. Now she would avenge her only child, but the mesh of chainmail on Beowulf's shoulders shielded his life. Turned the edge and tip of the blade, the son of Veclo would have surely perished at the Geats, and the Geats lost their warrior under the wide earth at the strong links and locks of his war gear, not help to save him. Holy God decided the victory. It was easy for the Lord, the ruler of heaven, to redress the balance once Beowulf got back up to his feet. Then he saw a blade that boded well, a sword in an armory, an ancient heirloom from the days of the giants, an ideal weapon, one that any warrior would envy. But so huge and heavy of itself, only Beowulf could wield it in battle. So the shielding hero, hard-pressed and enraged, took a firm hold of the hilt and swung the blade in an arc. A resolute blow that bit deep into her neck bone and severed it entirely. Toppling the doomed house of her flesh, she fell to the floor. The sword dripped blood. The swordsman was elated. A light appeared, and the place brightened, the way the sky does when heaven's candle is shining clearly. He inspected the vault, the sword held high, its hilt raised to guard and threaten. Aglach's thane scouted by the wall in Grendel's wake. Now the weapon was to prove its worth. The warrior determined to take revenge from every gross act Grendel had committed. Not only for that one occasion, when he had come to slaughter the sleeping troops, 15 of Hrothgar's house cards, surprised on their benches and ruthlessly devoured, and as many again carried away a brutal plunder. Beowulf in his fury now settled that score. He saw the monster in his resting place, war-weary and wrecked, a lifeless corpse, a casualty of the Battle of Herod. The body gaped at the stroke dealt to it after death. Beowulf cut the corpse's head off. Immediately the counsellors kept a lookout, with Hrothgar, watching the lake water, saw it heave up and surge of waves and blood and black backwash. They bowed grey heads, spoke in their sage, experienced way about the good warrior, how they would never again expect to see that prince returning in triumph to their king. It was clear to many that the wolf of the deep had destroyed them forever. The 9th hour of day arrived. Brave shielding abandoned the cliff top, and the king went home, but sick at heart, staring at the mire. The strangers held on. They wished, without hope, to behold the Lord Beowulf himself. Meanwhile, the sword began to wilt into gory icicles, to slather and thaw. It was a wonderful thing, the way it all melted as ice melts. When the father ceases the fetters off the frost and unravels the water ropes, he who wields power over time and tide, he is the true lord. The great Geat captain saw treasure in abundance, but carried no spoils from those quarters, except for the head and the inlaid hilt embossed with jewels. Its blade had melted, and the scrollwork on it burnt. So scalding was the blood of the poisonous fiend who had perished there. Then away he swam, the one who had survived the fall of his enemies, flailing to the surface. The wide water, the waves and pools were no longer infested. Once a wandering fiend let go for life in this unreliable world. The seafarer's leader made for land, resolutely swimming, delighted with his prize, the mighty load he was lugging to the surface. His thanes advanced in a troop to meet him, thanking God and taking great delight in seeing their prince back safe and sound. Quickly the hero's helmet and mail shirt were loosed and unlaced. The lake settled, clouds darkened above the bloodshot depths. With high hearts they headed away along footpaths and trails to fields, roads that they knew well. Each of them wrestling with the head they were carrying from the lakeside cliff. Men kingly in their courage and capable of difficult work. It was his task before to hoist Beowulf's head on the spear and bear it under the strain to the bright hall. But soon enough they neared the place. 14 geats in fine fettle, striding across the outlying ground in a delighted throng around their leader. In he came then, the Thane's commander, the Archai warrior, to address Hrothgar. His courage was proven, his glory was secure. Grendel's head was hauled by the hair, dragged across the floor where the people were drinking. A horror for both queen and company to behold. They stared in awe. It was an astonishing sight. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke.
So, son of Halfbane, Prince of the Shieldings, we are glad to bring this booty from the lake. It is token of triumph, and we tender it to you. I barely survived the battle in the water. It was hard fought, a desperate affair. It could have gone badly. If God had not helped me, the outcome would have been quick and fatal. Although fronting is hard-edged, I could never bring it to bear in battle. But the Lord of Men allowed me to behold, for he often helps unbefriended, an ancient sword signing on the wall, had been made for giants, therefore the wielding. Then my moment came in the combat. I struck the dwellers in that den. Next thing, the Damascene sword blade melted. It bloated and burned in the rushing blood. I have wrested the hilt from the enemy's hand, avenged the evil done to the Danes. It is what's due. And this I pledge, O Prince of the Shieldings. You could sleep secure with your company of troops in Harroth Hall. Never need for you fear for a single thing of your set or nation. Young warriors old, that laying waste of life that you or your young people endured of yore. Then the gold hilt was handed over to the old lord, a relic from long ago, by the venerable ruler. That rare smith work was passed on to the Prince of the Danes, who, when those devils perished, once death removed that murdering, guilt-steeped, God-cursed fiend, limiting his unholy life. And his mother as well, and it wilted to that king, who of all the lavish gift lords of the north was the best regarded between the two seas. Hrothgar spoke. He examined the hilt, the relic of old times. It was engraved all over and showed how war first came into the world, and the flood destroyed the tribe of giants. They suffered a terrible severance from the Lord, the Almighty, and made the waters rise, drowned them in the deluge for retribution. In pure gold inlay on the sword guards there were rune markings correctly incised, stating and recording for those whom the sword had been first made and ornamented with a scroll-worked hilt. Then everyone hushed as the son of Halfdane spoke this wisdom. A protector of this people pledged to uphold truth and justice, and to respect tradition, is entitled to affirm that this man was born to distinction. Beowulf, my friend, your fame has gone far and wide, you are known everywhere. In all things you are even-tempered, prudent, and resolute, so I stand firm by the promise of friendship we exchanged before. Forever you will be your people's mainstay and your warrior's helping hand. Hermond was different. The way he behaved, Equalisad, his rise in war brought little joy to the Danish people, only death and destruction. He vented his rage on men he cursed with, killed his own comrades, a pariah king who cut himself off from his own kind. Even though Almighty God had made him eminent and powerful, marked him from the start for a happy life. But a change happened. He grew bloodthirsty, gave no more rings to honor the Danes. He suffered in the end, for having plagued his people for so long. His life lost happiness. So learn from this and understand true values. I who tell you have entered into wisdom. It is a great wonder how Almighty God in his magnificence favors our race with rank and scope and the gift of wisdom. His way is wide. Sometimes he allows the mind of a man of distinguished birth to follow its bent to grant him fulfillment and felicity on earth and forwards to command in his own country. He permits him to lord it in many lands until man in his unthinkingness forgets that it will ever end for him. He indulges his desires. Illness and old age mean nothing to him. His mind is untroubled by envy or malice or the thought of enemies and their hate-honed swords. The whole world conforms to his will. He is kept from the worst until an element of overpowering enters him and takes hold. While the soul's guard, its sentry jars, is grown too distracted. A killer stalks him, an archer who draws a deadly bow, and then a man is hit in the heart. The arrow flies beneath his defences. The devious promptings of the demon start. His old positions seem paltry to him now. He covets, resents dishonour's custom, and bestows no gold. Because of good things that the heavenly powers gave him in the past, he ignores the shape of things to come. And finally the end arrives when the body he was sent collapses and falls, prey to its death. Ancestral possessions and the goods he hoarded are inherited by another, who lets them go with a liberal hand. O flower of warriors, beware of that trap. Choose, dear Beowulf, the better part, eternal rewards. Do not give way to pride. For a brief while your strength is in bloom, but it fades quickly. Soon there will follow illness or the sword to lay you low, or sudden fire, or surge of water, or a jabbing blade, or javelin from the air, or a pendage. Your piercing eye will dim and darken, and death will arrive, dear warrior, to sweep you away. Just so I ruled the Ring Danes' country for 50 years, defended them in wartime with spear and sword against constant assaults by many tribes. I came to believe my enemies had faded from the face of the earth. Still, what happened was a hard reversal. From bliss to grief, Grendel struck after lying in wait. He laid waste to the land, and from that moment my mind was in dread of his depredations. So I praised God in his heavenly glory, that I lived to behold this head dripping blood, that after such harrowing I could look upon it in triumph at last. Take your place then with pride and pleasure, and move to the feast. Tomorrow morning our treasure will be shared and showered upon you.
The Geat was elated and gladly obeyed the old man's bidding. He sat on the bench, and soon all was restored, the same as before. Happiness came back. The hall was thronged, and banquet set forth. Black night fell and covered them in darkness. The company rose for the old campaigner. The grey-haired prince was ready for bed, and a need for rest came over the brave shield-bearing Geat. He was weary seafarer, far from home, so immediately a house-guard guided him out. One whose office entailed looking after a thane on the road in these days might need a requirer. It was a noble courtesy. That great heart rested. The hall towered, gold-shingled and gabled, and the guests slept in it until the black raven, with raucous glee, announced heaven's joy. And a hurry of brightness overran the shadows. Warriors rose quickly, impatient to be off their own country. Was beckoning the nobles, and the bold voyager longed to be aboard his distant boat. Then a stalwart fighter ordered Hrunting to be brought to Unferth, and bade Unferth take the sword and thanked him for lending it. He said he had found it a friend in battle and a powerful help. He put no blame on the blade's cutting edge. He was a considerate man. And there the warriors stood in their war gear, eager to go, while their honored lord approached the platform where the others sat. The undaunted hero addressed Hrothgar. Beowulf, son of Beowulf, spoke. Mary, who crossed the sea, have to inform you that we feel a desire to return to Hecla. We have been welcomed and thoroughly entertained. You have treated us well. If there is any favor on earth I can perform beyond duties of arms, I have done already. Anything that would merit your affections more, I shall act, my lord, with audacity. If I ever hear from across the ocean that people on your borders are threatening battle as attackers have done from time to time, I shall land with 1,000 thanes at my back to help your cause. Hecla may be young to rule a nation, but this much I know about the King of the Gates. He will come to my aid and want to support me by word and action in honor of your need. When honor dictates that I raise the edge of space around you. But then
Thrandrick should think about travelling. As a king's son to the court of the Geats, you'll find many friends, foreign places. You'll have more than one who is himself worth meeting. Hrothgar spoke and answered him. The Lord in his wisdom sent you these words, and they came from the heart. I never heard so young a man make true observation. You're strong in body and mature in mind, impressive in speech. If it should come to pass that Hrothgar's descendant dies beneath a spear, if deadly battle, the sword, blade, or disease fells the prince who guards your people, and you are still alive, then I firmly believe the seafaring Geats won't find a man worthier of acclaim as a king and defender than you. If only you would undertake the lordship of your homeland, my liking for you deepens with time, dear Beowulf. What you have done is to draw two peoples, the Geat nation and us neighbouring Danes, into shared peace and a pact of friendship in spite of hatred we have harboured in the past. For as long as I rule this far-flung land, treasures will change hands, and each side will treat the other with gifts across the gannet's path. Over the broad sea, world prowls will bring presents and tokens. I know your people are beyond reproach in every respect, steadfast in the old way, with friend or foe.
Then the Earl's defender furnished the hero with 12 treasures and told him to set out. Sail with those gifts safely home to the people he loved, but to return promptly. And so the good and grey-haired Dane, that high-born king, kissed Beowulf and embraced his neck, then broke down in sudden tears. 2 forebodings disturbed him in his wisdom, but one was stronger. Never more would they meet each other face to face, and such was his affection that he could not help being overcome. His fondness for the man was so deep-founded, it warmed his heart and wound the heartstrings tight in his breast. The embrace ended, and Beowulf, glorious in his gold regalia, stepped the green earth, straining at anchor and ready for boarding. His boat awaited him, so he went on the journey, and Hrothgar's generosity was praised repeatedly. He was a peerless king until old age sapped his strength and did him mortal harm, as it had done many. Down to the waves then, dressed in the land with their chainmail warshirts, the young men marched in high spirits. The coast guard spied them, they setting forth the same as before. His salute this time was from the top of the cliff, was far from unmannerly. He galloped to meet them as they took ship in their shining gear. He said how welcome they would be in Geatland. Then the broad hull was breached on the sand, cargoed with treasure, horses, and war gear. Could prow mention the mast stood high, above Hrothgar's riches in the loaded hold. The guard who had watched the boat was given a sword with gold fittings, and in future days that present would make him a respected man at his place on the Mead Beach. Then the keel plunged and shook in the sea, and they sailed from Denmark. Right away the mast was rigged with a sea shawl. Sail ropes were tightened, timbers drummed, and stiff winds kept the wave crosser skimming ahead. As she heaved forward, her foamy neck was fleet and buoyant, lap prow lapping over currents, until finally the Geats caught sight of coastline of familiar cliffs. The keel reared up, wind lifted it home, and hit on the land. The harbour guard came hurrying out through the rolling water. He watched the offing land and hard on the lookout for those friends. With the anchor cables, he moored their craft right where it had been beached, in case a backwash might catch the hull and carry it away. He ordered the prince's treasure trove to be carried ashore. It was a short step from there to where Hrothgar's son and heir, Hygelac, the gold giver, makes his home on a secure cliff in the company of retainers. The building was magnificent, the king majestic in cost in his hall, although Hygd, his queen, was young and a few short years at court. Her mind was thoughtful and her manners sure. Eadred's daughter behaved generously, and stinted nothing when she distributed bounty to the Geats. Great Queen Mordred perpetrated terrible wrongs. If any retainer ever made bold to look her in the face, if an eye, not her lord's, stared at her directly during daylight, the outcome was sealed. He was kept bound in hand-tightened shackles, racked, tortured, until doom was pronounced, death by the sword, slash of blade, blood gushed, and death qualms in an evil display. Even a queen outstanding in beauty must not overstep like that. A queen should weep peace, not punish the innocent with the loss of life or imagined insults. But Hemming's kinsman put a halt to her ways, and drinkers round the table had another tale. She was less of a bane to the people's lives, less cruel-minded, after she was married to the brave Uffa, a bride arrayed in her gold finery, given away by a caring father, fairy to a young prince over dim seas. In days to come she would grace the throne and grow famous for her good deeds and conduct of life. Her high devotion to the hero king, who was the best king, it has been said, between the two seas or anywhere else on the face of the earth. Uffa was honoured far and wide for his generous ways. His fighting spirit and far-seeing defence of his homeland, from him there sprang Ealma, Gawain's grandson, kinsman of Hemming, his warrior's mainstay and master of the field. Heroic Beowulf and his band of men crossed a wide strand, striding along the sandy foreshore. The sun shone, the world candle warmed them from the south as they hastened to where, as they heard, the young king Ungentho's killer and his people's protector was dispensing rings inside his bond. Beowulf's return was reported to Hygelac as soon as possible. News that the captain was now in the enclosure, his battle brother back from the fray, alive and well, walking to the hall. Room was quickly made on the king's orders, and the troops filed across the cleared floor. After Hygelac had offered greetings to his loyal thane in lofty speech, he and his kinsman, that hailed survivor, sat face to face. Harrod's daughter moved about with the mead jug in her hand, taking care of the company, filling the cups the warriors held out. And Hygelac began to put courtesan's questions to his old comrade in the high hall. He hankered to know every tale the sea keats had to tell. How did you fare in your forward voyage, dear Beowulf? When you abruptly decided to sail away across the salt water and fight at the rot, did you help Hrothgar much in the end? Could you ease the princess of his well-known troubles? Your undertaking cast my spirits down. I dreaded the outcome of your expedition and pleaded with you.
Any more men among men in this world than myself and Grendel coming to grips on the better spot where I visited destruction on the victory shieldings and violated life in them. Losses I avenged, so no earthly offspring of Grendel's need ever boast of that bout before dawn. No matter how long the last of his evil family survives. When I first landed, I hastened to the ring hall and saluted Hrothgar. Once he discovered why I had come, the son of Halfdane sent me immediately to sit with his own sons on the bench. It was happy gathering. In my whole life I had never seen mead enjoyed more in any hall on earth. Sometimes the queen herself appeared, peace pledge between nations, to hearten the young ones and hand out a torque to a warrior, then take her place. Sometimes Hrothgar's daughter distributed ale to older ranks, in order on the benches. I heard the company call her farewell as she made her rounds, presenting men with the green-studded bowl, young bride-to-be to the gracious Ingeld in her gold-trimmed attire. The friend of the shieldings favours her betrothal. The guardian of the kingdom sees good in it, and hopes this woman will heal the old wounds and grievous feuds, but generally the spears prompt to retaliate when a prince is killed, no matter how admirable the bride may be. Think how the Heatherbroods will be bound to feel their lord Ingeld and his loyal thanes when he walks in with that woman to the feast. The Danes are at the table being entertained, honored guests in a glittering regalia, barristering mail that was their host's birthright, looted when the Heatherbroods could no longer wield their weapons in the shield clash, when they went down with their beloved comrades and forfeited their lives. Then an old spearsman will speak while they are drinking, having glimpsed some heirloom that brings alive memories of the massacre. His mood will darken, and heart-stricken in the stress of his emotion, he will begin to test a young man's temper and stir up trouble, starting like this. Now, my friend, don't you recognize your father's sword, his favourite weapon? The one he wore when he went out in his worn mask to face the Danes on their final day. After Wethergill died and his men were doomed, the shieldings quickly claimed the field. And now here's the son of one or other of those same killers coming through our hall, overbearing us, mouthing boasts, and rigged in armour that is by right yours. And so he keeps on recalling and accusing, working things up with bitter words, until one of the lady's retainers lies spattered in blood, split open on her father's account. The killer knows the lie of the land and escapes with his life. Then on both sides, the oath-bound lords will break the peace. A passionate hate will build up in Ingeld, and love for his bride will falter in him as a few of the wrinkles. I therefore suspect the good faith of the Heatherbards, the truth of their friendship, and the trustworthiness of their alliance with the Danes. But now, my lord, I shall carry on with my account of Grendel. The whole story of everything that happened in the hand-to-hand fight. After Heaven's gem had gone mildly to earth, that maddened spirit, the terror of those twilights, came to attack us who stood guard, still safe inside the hall. Their deadly violence came down on Indisio, and he fell as fate ordained. The first to perish, rigged out for the combat. A comrade from our ranks had come to grieve in Grandel's maw. He had dropped the entire body. There was blood on his teeth. He was bloated and furious, all roused up, yet still and ready to leave the hall empty-handed. Renowned for his might, he matched himself against me, wildly reaching. He had his roomy pouch, a strange accoutrement, intricately strung and hung at the ready a rare patchwork of devilishly fitted dragon skins. I had done him no wrong, yet the raging demon wanted to cram me and many another into this bag. But it was not to be. Once I got to my feet in a blind fury, it would take too long to tell how I repaid the terror of the land for every life he took. And so won credit for you, my king, and for all your people. And although he got away to enjoy life's sweetness for a while longer, his right hand stayed behind him in Herot, evidence of his miserable overthrow, as he dived into the murk on the mire bottom. I got lavish rewards from the lord of the Danes for my part in the battle, beaten gold and much else. Once morning came, and we took our places at the banquet table. There was singing and excitement. An older sighter carrier stories recalled the early days. At times, some hero made the timbered harp tremble with sweetness related to true and tragic happenings. At times, the king gave the proper turn to some fantastic tale, or battle-scarred veteran, bowed with age, would begin to remember the marital deeds of his youth and prime, and be overcome as the past welled up in his wintry heart. We were happy there for the whole day long, and enjoyed our time until another night descended upon us. Then suddenly the vehement mother avenged her son, and wreaked destruction. Death had robbed her. Gates had slain Grendel, so his ghastly dam struck back with bare-faced defiance laid a man low. Thus life departed from the sage Aeshir, an elder wise in council, but afterwards, on the morning following, the Danes could not burn the dead body, nor lay the remains of the man they loved on his funeral pyre. She had fled with the corpse and taken refuge beneath torrents on the mountain. It was a hard blow for Hrothgar to bear, harder than any he had undergone before. And so the heart-sore king beseeched me in your royal name to take my chances underwater to win glory and prove my worth. He promised me rewards. Hence, as is well known, I went to my encounter with the terrormonger at the bottom of the tarn. For while it was hand-to-hand between us, the blood went curling among the currents, and I beheaded Grendel's mother in the hall with the mighty sword. I barely managed to escape with my life. My time had not yet come, but Halfdane's heir, the shelter of those earls, again endowed me with gifts in abundance. Thus the king acted with due custom. I was paid and recompensed completely, given full measure and the freedom to choose from Hrothgar's treasures by Hrothgar himself. These, King Hygelac, I am happy to present to you as gifts. It is still upon your grace that all favour depends. I have few kinsmen who are close, my king, except for your kind self. Then he ordered the boar-famed standard to be brought, the battle-topping helmet, the mail-shirt grey as hoarfrost, and precious war sword, and proceeded with his speech. When Hrothgar presented this war gear to me, he instructed me, my lord, to give you some account of why it signifies his special favour. He said it had belonged to his older brother, King Herogar, who had long kept it, but that Herogar had never bequeathed it to his son Hereward. That worthy Sion, loyal as he was, enjoyed well. I
heard 4 horses that were headed over Nix. Beowulf bestowed 4 bay steeds to go with the armor, swift gallopers all alike. So ought a kinsman act, instead of plotting and planning in secret to bring people to grief, or conspiring to arrange the death of comrades. The warrior king was uncle to Beowulf, and honored by his nephew. Each was concerned for the other's good. I heard he presented Hygd with a gorget, a priceless work that the prince's daughter, Wealhtheow, had given him, and 3 horses, supple creatures brilliantly saddled. The bright necklace would be luminous on Hygd's breast. Thus Beowulf bore himself with valor. He was formidable in battle, yet behaved with honor and took no advantage, never cut down a comrade who was drunk, kept his temper, and, warrior that he was, watched and controlled his God-sent strength and his outstanding natural powers. He had been poorly regarded for a long time, and was taken by the Geats for less than he was worth. And their lord, too, had never much esteemed him in the mead hall. They firmly believed that he lacked force, that the prince was a weakling, but presently every affront to his deserving was reversed. Yeah. The battle-famed king, bulwark of his earls, ordered a gold-chased heirloom of Hrethel's to be brought in. It was the best example of a gem-studded sword in the Geat treasury. This he laid on Beowulf's lap, and then rewarded him with land as well, 7,000 hides, and a hall and a throne. Both owned land by birth in that country, ancestral grounds, but the greater right and sway were inherited by the higher born. A lot was to happen in later days. In the fury of battle, Hygelac fell, and the shelter of Heardred's shield proved useless against the fierce aggression of the Schyflings. Ruthless swordsmen, seasoned campaigners, they came against him and his conquering nation, and with cruel force cut him down, so that afterwards the wide kingdom reverted to Beowulf. He ruled it well for 50 winters, grew old and wise as warden of the land, until one began to dominate the dark, a dragon on the prowl from the steep vaults of a stone-roofed barrow, where guarded a hoard. There was a hidden passage unknown to men, but some managed to enter it and interfere with the heathen trove. He had handled and removed a gem-studded goblet. It gained him nothing, though with the thief's wiles he had outwitted the sleeping dragon that drove him into a rage. As the people of that country would soon discover, the intruder who broached the dragon's treasure and moved him to wrath had never meant to. It was desperation on the part of a slave, fleeing the heavy hand of some master, guilt-ridden and on the run, going to ground. But soon he began to shake with terror. In shock, the wretch panicked and ran away with the precious metalwork. There were many other heirlooms heaped inside the earth house, because long ago, with deliberate care, somebody now forgotten had buried the riches of a high-born race in this ancient cache. Death had come and taken them all in times gone by, and the only one left to tell their tale, the last of their line, could look forward to nothing but the same fate for himself. He foresaw that his joy in the treasure would be brief. A newly constructed barrow stood waiting on a wide headland close to the waves. His entry secured into the keeper of the hoard had carried the goods and gold and ware worth preserving. His words were few. No, earth, hold what earls once held, and heroes can no more. It was mine from me first by honorable men. My own people have been ruined in war. One by one they went down to death, looked their last on life in sweet life in the hall. I am left with nobody to bear a sword or burnish plated goblets, but sheen on the cup. The companies have departed. The hard helmet hashed with gold, always stripped of its hoops, and the helmet shiner, who should polish the metal of the war mask, sleeps. The coat of mail that came through all fights, through shield, collapse, and cut of sword, decays with the warrior. Nor may webbed mail range far and wide on the warlord's back, beside his mustered troops.
No trembling harp, nor no tuned timbre, no tumbling hawk swerving through the hall, no swift horse pawing the courtyard. Pillage and slaughter have emptied the hearth of entire peoples.
And so he mourned as he moved about the world, deserted and alone, lamenting his unhappiness, day and night until death's flood brimmed up in his heart. And an old harrower of the dark happened to find the hoard open, the burning one who hunts the out barrows, the slick-skinned dragon threatening the night sky with streams of fire. People on the farms are in dread of him. He is driven to hunt out hordes underground, to guard heathen gold through age-long vigils, though to little avail. For 3 centuries, the scourge of the people had stood guard on that stoutly protected underground treasury, until the intruder unleashed its fury. He hurried to his lord with the gold-plated cup and made his plea to be reinstated. Then the vault was rifled, the ring hoard robbed, and the wretched man had his request granted. His master gazed on that find from the past for the first time. When the dragon awoke, trouble flared again. He rippled down the rock, writhing with anger, when he saw the footprints of the prowler who had stolen too close to his dreaming head. So may a man not marked by fate easily escape exile and woe by the grace of God. The horde guardian scorched the ground as he scoured and hunted for the trespasser who had troubled his sleep. Hot and savage, he kept circling and circling the outside of the mound. No man appeared in that desert waste. But he worked himself up by imagining battle. Then back in he'd go in search of the cup, only to discover signs that someone had stumbled upon the golden treasures. So the guardian of the mound, the horde watcher, waited for the gloaming with fierce impatience. His pent-up fury at the loss of the vessel made him long to hit back and lash out in flames. Then, to his delight, day waned and he could wait no longer behind the wall, but hurtled forth in a fiery blaze. The first to suffer were the people on the land, but before long it was their treasure-giver who would come to grief. The treasure began to belch out flames and burn bright homesteads. There was a hot glow that scared everyone, for this vile sky-winger would leave nothing alive in his wake. Everywhere the havoc he wrought was in evidence. Far and near, the Geat nation bore the brunt of his brutal assaults and virulent hate. Then back to the horde he would dart before daybreak, to hide in his den. He had swinged the land, swathed it in flame, in fire and burning, and now he felt secure in the vaults of his barrow. But his trust was unwavering. Then Beowulf was given the bad news. A hard truth, his own home, the best of buildings, had burnt to a cinder, the throne room of the Geats. It threw the hero into deep anguish and darkened his mood. The wise man thought he must have thwarted ancient ordinance of the eternal Lord, broken his commandment. His mind was in turmoil. Unaccustomed anxiety and gloom confused his brain. The fire dragon has razed the coastal region and reduced forts and earthworks to dust and ashes. So the war king planned and plotted his revenge. The warrior's protector, prince of the hall troop, ordered a marvelous all-iron shield from his smithy works. He well knew that linden boards would let him down and timber burn. After many trials, he was destined to face the end of his days in this mortal world, as was the dragon, for all his long leasehold on the treasure. Yet the Prince of the Rings was too proud to line up with a large army against the sky-plague. He had scant regard for the dragon as a threat, no dread at all of its courage or strength, for he had kept going often in the past, through perils and ordeals of every sort. After he had purged Hrothgar's hall, triumphant in Heorot, and beaten Grendel, he outgrappled the monster and his evil kin. One of his cruelest hand-to-hand encounters had happened when Hagla, king of the Geats, was killed in Friesland. The people's friend and lord, Hrothgar's son, slaked a sword's blade thirst for blood. But Beowulf's prodigious gifts as a swimmer guaranteed his safety. He arrived at the shore, shouldering 30 battle dresses, the booty he had won. There was little for the headwear to be happy about, as they shielded their faces and fighting on the ground began in earnest. With Beowulf against them, few could hope to return home. Across the wide sea, desolate and alone, the son of Ecgtheow swam back to his people. There he'd offer him throne and authority as lord of the ring horde. With Hygelac dead, she had no belief in her son's ability to defend their homeland against foreign invaders. Yet there was no way the weakened nation could get Beowulf to give in and agree to be alleviated over Hedred as his lord or to undertake the office of kingship. But it did provide support for the prince, honored and minded him until he matured as ruler of Geatland. Then overseas exiles arrived, sons of Othere. They had rebelled against the best of all the sea kings in Sweden. The one who held sway in the Scheifling nation, their renowned prince, lord of the mead hall, that marked the end of Hygelac's son, his hospitality was mortality rewarded with wounds from a sword. Heredred lay slaughtered and Onela returned to the land of Sweden, leaving Beowulf to ascend the throne, to sit in majesty and rule over the Geats. He was a good king. In days to come, he contrived to avenge the fall of his prince. He befriended Eadgils, when Eadgils was friendless, aiding his cause with weapons and warriors over the wide sea, sending him men. The feud was settled on a comfortless campaign when he killed Onela. And so the son of Ecgtheow had survived very extreme, excelling himself in daring and in danger, until the day arrived when he had to come face to face with the dragon. The lord of the Geats took elven comrades and went into a rage to recontrite. By then he had discovered the cause of the affliction been visited upon the people. The precious cup had come to him from the hand of the finder, the one who had started all the strife, and was now added as a 13th to their number. They pressed, ganged, and compelled this poor creature to be their guide. Against his will he led them to the earth vault he alone knew, an underground barrow near the sea billows and heaving waves, heaped inside with exquisite metalwork. The one who stood guard was dangerous and watchful, warden of that trove buried under the earth. No easy bargain would be made in place by any man. The veteran king sat down on the cliff top. He wished good luck to the Geats, who had shared his hearth and his gold. He was sad at heart, unsettled yet ready, sensing his death. His fate hovered near, unknowable but certain. It would soon claim his comfort soul, part life from them. Before long the prince's spirit would spin free from his body. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke.
Many a skirmish I survived when I was young, and many times of war. I remember them well. At 7 I was fostered out by my father, left in charge by my people's lord. King Utherthel kept me and took care of me. I was open-handed, behaved like a kinsman. While I was his ward, he treated me no worse as a wean about the place than one of his own boys. Herabeld and Haglishin, or my own Hygelac, for the eldest Herabeld, an unexpected deathbed was laid out, through a brother's doing, when Hyacinth bent his horn-tipped bow and loosened the arrow that destroyed his life. He shot wide and buried a shaft in the flesh and blood of his own brother. That offense was beyond redress, a wrong footing of the heart's affections. For who could avenge the prince's life or pay his death price? It was like the misery felt by an old man who has lived to see his son's body swing on the gallows. He begins to keen and weep for his boy, watching the raven glow from where he hangs. He can be of no help. The wisdom of age is worthless to him. Morning after morning he wakes to remember that his child is gone, but he has no interest in living on until another heir is born in the hall. Now that his firstborn has entered death's domain forever. He gazes sorrowfully at his son's dwelling, the banquet hall bereft of all delight. The wimsept hearthstone, the horsemen are sleeping, the warriors underground. What was is no more. No tunes from the harp, no cheer raised in the yard. Alone in his longing he lies down on his bed and sings a lament. Everything seems too large, the steadings and the fields. Such was the feeling of loss endured by the lord of the Geats. After Herebald's death, he was helplessly placed to set to rights the wrong committed, could not punish the killer in accordance with the law of the blood feud, although he felt no love for him. Heartsore, wearied, he turned away from life's joys, chose God's light, and departed, leaving buildings and lands to his sons, as a man of substance will. Then over the wide sea, Swedes and Geats battled and feuded and fought without quarter. Hostilities broke out when Hrethel died. Oganthlo's sons were unrelenting, refusing to make peace, campaigning violently from coast to coast, constantly setting up terrible ambushes around Heronshil. My own kith and kin avenged these evil events, as everybody knows, but the price was high. One of them paid with his life. Iasin, Lord of the Geats, met his fate there and fell in battle. Then, as I have heard, Hygelac's sword was raised in mourning against Oganthlo, his brother's killer. When Erefork left the old Swede's helmet, halved it open, he fell death pale. His fewed, calloused hand could not stave off the fatal stroke. The treasures that Hygelac lavished on me I paid for when I fought as fortune allowed me with my glittering sword. He gave me land and the security land brings, so he had no call to go looking for some lesser champion, some mercenary from among the Gifthas, or the Speardanes, or the men of Sweden. I marched ahead of him, always there at the front of the line, and I shall fight like that for as long as I live, as long as this sword shall last, which has stood me in good stead, late and soon, ever since I killed Doraven the Frank in front of the two armies. He brought back no looted breastplate to the Frisian king, but fell in battle. Their standard-bearer, high-born and brave, no sword blade sent him to his death. My bare hands stilled his heartbeats and wrecked the bone house. Now blade and hand, sword and sword stroke, will essay the horde. Beowulf smoke made a formal boast for the last time. I risked my life when I was young. Now I am old, but as king of the people, I shall pursue this fight for the glory of winning. If the evil one will only abandon his earth fort and face me in the open. Then he addressed each dear companion one final time, the fighters in their helmets, resolute and highborn. I would rather not use a weapon if I knew another way to grapple with the dragon and make good my boast, as I did against Grendel in days gone by. But I shall be meeting molten venom in the fire he breathes, so I go forth in mail shirt and shield. I won't shift a foot when I meet the cave guard. What occurs on the wall between the two of us will turn out as fate, overseer of men decides. I am resolved. I scorn further words against the sky-born foe. Men-at-arms, remain here on the barrow, safe in your armor, to see which one of us is better in the end at bearing wounds in a deadly fray. This fight is not yours, nor is it up to any man except me to measure his strength against the monster or to prove his worth. I shall win the gold by my courage, or else mortal combat, doom of battle. I will bear your lord away. Then he drew himself up beside his shield. The fabled warrior, in his war shirt and helmet, trusted in his own strength entirely, and went under the crag, no coward path. Hard by the rock face, that hall veteran, a good man who had gone repeatedly into combat and danger, and come through, saw a stone arch and a gushing stream that burst from the barrow, blazing and wafting a deadly heat. It would be hard to survive unscathed near the horde, to hold firm against the dragon in those flaming depths. Then he gave a shout. The Lord of the Geese unburdened his breast and broke out in a storm of anger. Under grey stone his voice challenged and resounded clearly. Hate was ignited. The horde guard recognized a human voice. The time was over for peace and parleying. Pouring forth in a hot battle fume, the breath of the monster burst from the rock. Pouring forth in a hot battle fume, the breath of the monster burst from the rock. There was a rumble underground. Down there in the barrow, Beowulf the warrior lifted his shield. The outlandish thing writhed and convulsed and viciously turned on the king, whose keen-edged sword, an heirloom inherited by ancient right, was already in his hand. Roused to fury, each antagonist struck terror in the other. Unyielding, the lord of his people loomed by his tall shield, sure of his ground. While the serpent looped and unleashed itself, swaddled in flames, it came gliding and flexing and racing towards its fate. Yet his shield defended the renowned leader's life and limb for a shorter time than he meant it to. That final day was the first time when Beowulf fought and fate denied him glory in battle. So the king of the Geats raised his hand and struck hard at the enameled scales, but scarcely cut through. The blade flashed and slashed, yet the blow was far less powerful than the hard-pressed king had need of at that moment.
The mound keeper went into spasm and sprouted deadly flames when he felt the stroke battle fire. Billowed and spewed, Beowulf was foiled of a glorious victory. The glittering sword, infallible before that day, failed when he unsheathed it, as it never should have. For the son of Beowulf, it was no easy thing to have to give ground like that and go unwillingly to inhabit another home in a place beyond. So every man must yield to leasehold of his days. Before long, the fierce contenders clashed again. The horde guard took heart, inhaled and swelled up, and got a new wind. He who had once ruled was furled in fire, and had to face the worst. No help or backing was to be had then from his high-born comrades. That hand-picked troop broke ranks and ran for their lives to the safety of the wood. But within one heart sorrow welled up in a man of worth. The claims of kinship cannot be denied. His name was Beowulf, a son of Weohstan's, a well-regarded trifling warrior related of fire. When he saw his lord tormented by the heat of his scalding helmet, he remembered the bountiful gifts bestowed on him, how well he lived among the Waymundings, the freehold he inherited from his father before him. He could not hold back. One hand brandished the yellow-timbered shield, the other drew his sword, an ancient blade that was said to have belonged to Eamund, the son of Othere, the one Weohstan had slain when he was an exile without friends. He carried the arms to the victim's kinfolk, the burnished helmet, the webbed chainmail, and that relic of the giants. But Onela returned the weapons to him, rewarded Weohstan with Eamund's war gear. He ignored the blood feud, the fact that Eamund was his brother's son. Weohstan kept that war gear for a lifetime, the sword and the mail shirt, until it was the son's turn to follow his father and perform his part. Then, in old age, at the end of his days, among the weather geats, he bequeathed to Beowulf innumerable weapons. And now the youth was to enter the line of battle with his lord, his first time to be tested as a fighter. His spirit did not break, and the ancestral blade would keep its edge, as the dragon discovered as soon as they came together in combat. Sad at heart, addressing his companions, Beowulf spoke wise and fluent words.
I remember that time when mead was flowing, how we pledged loyalty to our lord in the hall, promised our ring giver we would be worth our price. Made good the gift of the war gear, those swords and helmets, and when his need required it. He picked us out from the army deliberately, honored us, and judged us fit for this action. Made me these lavish gifts, and all because he considered us the best of his arms-bearing thanes. And now, although he wanted this challenge to be one he'd face by himself alone, the shepherd of our land, a man unequaled in the quest for glory and a name for daring, now the day has come when this lord we serve needs sound men to give him their support. Let us go to him, help our leader through the hot flame and dread of the fire. As God is my witness, I would rather my body were robbed in the same burning blaze as my gold giver's body than go back home bearing arms. That is unthinkable, unless we have first slain the foe and defended the life of the prince of the Weather Geats. I well know the things he has done for us deserve better. Should he alone be left exposed to fall in battle? We must bond together, shield and helmet, mail, shirt and sword. Then he waded the dangerous reek and went under arms to his lord, saying only, Go on, dear Beowulf, do everything you said you would when you were still young, and vowed you would never let your name and fame be dimmed while you still lived. Your deeds are famous, so stay resolute, my lord. Defend your life now, with the whole of your strength. I shall stand by you. After those words, a wildness rose in the dragon again, and it drove to attack, heaving up fire, hunting for enemies. The humans it loathed. Flames lapped the shield, charred it to the boss, and the body armor on the young warrior was useless to him. But Beowulf did well under the wide rim. Beowulf shared with him once his own had shattered in sparks and ashes. Inspired again by the thought of glory, the war king threw his whole strength behind a sword stroke and connected with the skull. A nagling snapped, where Beowulf's ancient iron-grey sword let him down in the fight. It was never his fortune to be helped in combat by the cutting edge of weapons made of iron. But when he wielded the sword, no matter how blooded and hard-edged the blade, his hand was too strong. The stroke he dealt, I have heard, would ruin it.
he could reap no advantage. Then the bane of that people, that fire-breathing dragon, was made to attack for the third time. Then a chance came. He caught the hero in a rush of flame and clamped sharp fangs into his neck. Beowulf's body ran wet with his life's blood. It came welling out. Next thing they say, the noble son of Weohstan saw the king in danger at his side and displayed his inborn bravery and strength. He left the head alone, but his fighting hand was burned when he came to his kinsman's aid. He lunged at the enemy lower down, so that his decorated sword sank into its belly, and the flames grew weaker. Once again the king gathered his strength and drew a stabbing knife he carried on his belt, sharpened for battle. He stuck it deep into the dragon's flank. Beowulf dealt it a deadly wound. They had killed the enemy. Courage quelled his life. That pair of kinsmen, partners in nobility, had destroyed the foe. So every man should act, be at the hand when needed, but for now, for the king, this would be the last of his many labors and triumphs in the world. Then the wound dealt by the ground burner earlier began to scald and swell. Beowulf discovered deadly poisons suppurating inside him, surges of nausea, and so, in his wisdom, the prince realized his state and struggled towards the seat on the rampart. He steadied his gaze on those gigantic stones, saw how the earthwork was braced with arches built over columns, and now that Thane unquelled for goodness with his own hands, washed his lord's wounds, swabbed the weary prince with water, bathed him clean, unbuckled his helmet. Beowulf spoke in spite of his wounds. He still spoke, for he well knew his days in the world had been lived out to the end. His allotted time was drawing to a close. Death was very near.
Now is the time when I would have wanted to bestow some more on my own son. Had it been my fortune to have fathered an heir and live on in his flesh, for 50 years I ruled this nation. No king of every neighboring clan would dare face me with troops. None had the power to intimidate me. I took what came, cared for, and stood by things in my keeping. Never fomented quarrels, never swore to a lie. All this consoles me. Doomed as I am and sickening for death, because of my right ways, the rule of mankind never blamed me when the breath leaves my body for murder of kinsmen. Go now quickly, dear Wiglaf, under the grey stone, where the dragon is laid out, lost to his treasure. Hurry to feast your eyes on the hoard. Away you go. I want to examine that ancient gold. Gaze my fill on those garnered jewels. My going will be easier, for I've seen the treasure. The less trouble letting go of the life and lordship I have long maintained.
And so I have heard. The son of Weohstan quickly obeyed the command of his languishing, war-weary lord. When he went in his chainmail under the rock-piled roof of the barrow, exulting in his triumph, and saw beyond the seat a treasure trove of astonishing riches, wall hangings that were a wonder to behold, glittering gold spread across the ground, the old dawn-scorching serpent's den, packed with goblets and vessels from the past, tarnished and corroding, rusty helmets all eaten away, armbands everywhere, artfully wrought. How easily treasure buried in the ground, gold hidden, however skillfully, can escape from any man. And he saw, too, a standard, entirely of gold, hanging high over the hoard, a masterpiece of filigree. It glowed with light, so he could make out the ground at his feet and inspect the valuables. Of the dragon there was no remaining sign. The sword had dispatched him. Then the story goes, a certain man plundered the hoard in that immemorial how, filled his arms with flagons and plates, anything he wanted, and took the standard also, most brilliant of banners. Already the blade of the old King Sharp's killing sword had done its worst. The one who had for long minded the hoard hovering over gold, unleashing fire surging forth midnight after midnight, had been mowed down. Wiglaf went quickly, keen to get back, excited by the treasure. Anxiety waited on his brave heart. He was hoping he would find the leader of the Geats alive where he had left him, helpless, earlier on the open ground. So he came to the place, carrying the treasure, and found his old lord bleeding profusely, his life at an end. Again he began to swab his body. The beginnings of an utterance broke out from the king's breast cage. The old lord gazed sadly at the gold.
To the everlasting Lord of all, to the King of glory, I give thanks that I behold this treasure here in front of me. that I have been allowed to leave my people so well endowed on the day I die. Now that I have bartered my last breath to own this fortune, it is up to you to look after the needs. I can hold out no longer. Order my troop to construct a burrow on a headland on the coast after my pyre has cooled. It will loom on the horizon at ferociousness and be a reminder among my people, so that in coming times crews under sail will call it Beowulf's burrow, as they steer ships across the wide and shrouded waters.
Then the king, in his great-heartedness, unclasped the collar of gold from his neck and gave it to the young thane, telling him to use it and the war shirt and the gilded helmet well. You are the last of us,
the only one left of the Mundings. Fate swept us away, sent my whole brave high-born clan to their final doom. Now I must follow them.
That was the warrior's last word. He had no more to confide. The furious heat of the pyre would assail him. His soul fled from his breast to his destined place among the steadfast ones. It was hard then on the young hero, having to watch the one he held so dear there on the ground, going through his death agony. The dragon from underneath, his nightmarish destroyer, lay destroyed as well, utterly without life. No longer would his snake folds ply themselves to safeguard hidden gold. Hard-edged blades, hammered out and keenly filed, had finished him, so that the sky roarer lay there rigid, brought low beside the treasure lodge. Never again would he glitter and glide and show himself off in midnight air, exulting in his riches. He fell to earth through the battle strength in Beowulf's arm. There were few indeed, as far as I have heard, big and brave as they may have been, few who have held out if they had to face the outpourings of that poison breather, or gone foraging on the ring hall floor and found the deep barrow dweller on guard and awake. The treasure had been won, bought and paid for by Beowulf's death. Both had reached the end of the road through the life they had been lent. Before long, the battle dodgers abandoned the wood. The ones who had let down their lord earlier, the tail-turners, 10 of them together. When he needed them most, they had made off. Now they were ashamed and came behind shields in their battle outfits to where the old man lay. They watched Wiglaf, sitting worn out, a comrade shoulder to shoulder with his lord, trying in vain to bring him round with water. Much as he wanted to, there was no way he could preserve his lord's life on earth, or alter in the least the Almighty's will. When God judged right, would rule what happened to every man, as it does to this day. And a stern rebuke was bound to come from the young warrior to the ones who had been cowards. Wiglaf, son of Weohstan, spoke disdainfully and in disappointment.
Anyone ready to admit the truth will surely realize that the Lord of Men, who showered you with gifts and gave you the armor you're standing in, when he would distribute helmets and mail shirts to men on the mead benches, a prince treating his thanes in hall to the best he could find, far or near, was throwing weapons uselessly away. It would be a sad waste when the war broke out. Beowulf had little cause to brag about his armed guard. Yet God, who ordains, wins or loses, allowed him to strike with his own blade when bravery was needed. There was little I could do to protect his life in the heat of the fray, yet I found new strength welling up when I went to help him. Then my sword connected, and the deadly assaults of our foe grew weaker. The fire coursed less strongly from his head, but when the worst happened, too few rallied around the prince. So it is goodbye now to all you know and loved on your home ground, the open-handedness of giving of war swords. Every one of you with freeholds of land, our whole nation will be dispossessed. One princes from beyond get tidings of how you turned and fled and disgraced yourself. A warrior will sooner die than live a life of shame.
Then he ordered the outcome of the fight to be reported to those camped on the ridge. That crowd of retainers who had sat all morning sat at heart, shield-bearers wondering about the men they loved. Would this day be his last, or would he return? He told the truth and did not balk. The rider who wore the news to Clifftop, he addressed them all.
Now the people's pride and love, Lord of the Gates, is laid on his deathbed. Brought down by the dragon's attack, beside him lies the bane of his life, dead from knife wounds. Was no way Beowulf could manage to get better from the monster with his sword. Beowulf sits at Beowulf's side, the son of Weston. The living warrior watched by the dead, keeping wary vigil, holding awake for the loved and the loathed. Now war is looming over our nation. Soon it will be known to Franks and Friesens far and wide that the king is gone. Hostility has been great among the Franks since Hagelak sailed forth at the head of the war fleet into Friesland. There the Hitwer harried and attacked and overwhelmed him with great odds. The leader in his war gear was little fell amongst followers, that the Lord did not favour his company with spoils. The Merovingian king has been an enemy to us ever since. Nor do I expect peace or pact keeping of any sort from the Swedes. Remember at Ravenswood, Oganthlo slaughtered Hyacinth, Rethel's son. When the Geat people in their arrogance first attacked the fierce Shiflings, the return blow was quickly struck by Othair's father. Old and terrible, he felled the Sea King and saved his own aged wife, the mother Onilla, and of Othair, bereft of their gold rings. Then he kept hard on the heels of the foe and drove them, leaderless, lucky to get away, in desperate rout into Ravenswood. His army surrounded the weary remnant where they nursed their wounds. All through the night he howled threats at those huddled survivors, promised to axe their bodies open when dawn broke, dangle them from the gallows to feed the birds. But first light, when their spirits were lowest, relief arrived. They heard the sound of Hagelak's horn, his trumpet calling as he came to find them, the hero in pursuit, at hand with troops. The bloody swath that Swedes and Gates got through each other was everywhere. No one could miss their murderous feuding. Then the old man made his move, pulled back, barred his people in. Oganthlo withdrew to higher ground. Hagelak's pride and prowess as a fighter were known to the Earl. He had no confidence that he could hold out against that horde of seamen, defend his wife and the ones he loved from the shock of the attack. He retreated for shelter behind the earth wall. Then Hagelak swooped on the Swedes at bay. His banners swarmed into their refuge. His Geat forces drove forward to destroy the camp. There in his grey hairs, Oganthlo was cornered, ringed around with swords, and it came to pass that the king's fate was in Eofor's hands, and in his alone. Wulf, son of Wonred, went for him in anger, split him open so that blood came spurting from under his hair. The old hero still did not flinch, but parried fast, hit back with a harder stroke. The king turned and took him on. The Mordred's son, the brave Wolf, could land no blow against the edgelord. Oganthlo divided his helmet so that he buckled and bowed his bloodied head and dropped to the ground. But his doom held off. Though he was cut deep, he recovered again. With his brother down, the undaunted Eofor, Hagelak's Thane, hefted his sword and smashed murderously at the massive helmet past the lifted shield, and the king collapsed. The shepherd of people was sheared for life. Many of them hurried to help Wolf bandage and lifted him, now that they were left. Masters of the blood-soaked battleground. One warrior stripped the other, looted Oganthlo's iron-milk coat, his hard sword hilt, his helmet too, and carried Gareth to King Hagelak. He accepted the prize, promised fairly that reward would come, and kept his word. For their bravery in action, when they arrived home, Eofor and Wolf were overloaded by Rethel's son, Hagelak the Great, with gifts of land and linked rings that were worth a fortune. They had won glory, so there was no gainsaying his generosity, and he gave Eofor his only daughter to bide at home with him, in honour and a bond. So this bad blood between us and the Swedes, this vicious feud, I am convinced, is bound to revive. They will cross our borders and attack in force when they find out that Beowulf is dead. In days gone by, when our warriors fell and we were undefended, he kept our coffers and our kingdom safe. He worked for the people, but as well as that, he behaved like a hero. We must hurry now to take the last look at the king and launch him, Lord and Lavisher of Rings, on the funeral road. His royal pyre will melt no small amount of gold, heaped there in a hoard. It was bought at a heavy cost, and that pile of rings he paid for at the end with his own life will go up with the flame, be furled in fire. Treasure no follower will wear in his memory, nor lovely woman link and attach a torque around her neck. But often, repeatedly, in the path of exile, they shall walk bereft, bowed under woe, now that their leader's laugh is silenced.
High spirits quenched, many a spear drawn cold to the touch will be taken down and waved on high. The swept harp won't waken warriors, but the raven winging darkly over the doom will have news, tidings for the eagle of how he hooked and ate, how the wolf and he made short work of the dead. Such was the drift of the dire report that gallant men deserved. He got little wrong in what he told and predicted the whole troop rose in tears, then took their way to the uncanny scene under Menace. There on the sand where his soul had left him, they found him at rest, their ring giver from days gone by, the great man that breathed his last. Beowulf the king had indeed met with a marvellous death. What they saw first was far stranger. The serpent on the ground, gruesome and vile, lying facing him. The fire dragon was scarcely burnt, scorched all colours. From head to tail, his entire length was 50 feet. He had shimmered forth on the night air once, then winged back down to his den. But death owned him now. He would never enter his earth gallery again. Beside him stood pitchers and piled up dishes, silent flagons, precious swords, eaten through with rust, ranged as they had been while they waited their 1,000 winters underground. That huge cache gold inherited from an ancient race was under a spell, which meant no one was ever permitted to enter the ring hall unless God himself, mankind's keeper, true king of triumphs, allowed some person pleasing to him, and in his eyes worthy, to open the hoard. What had come about brought to nothing the hopes of the one who had wrongly hidden riches under the rock face. First the dragon slew that man among men, who in turn made fierce amends, and settled the feud. Made famous for his deeds, a warrior may be, but remains a mystery where his life will end, when he may no longer dwell in the mead hall among his own. So it was with Beowulf when he faced the cruelty and cunning of the mount guard. He himself was ignorant of how his departure from the world would happen. The high-born chiefs who had buried the treasure declared it until doomsday so accursed that whoever robbed it would be guilty of wrong and grimly punished for their transgression. Asked in hellbound and in heathen shrines, yet Beowulf's gaze at the gold treasure when he first saw it had not been selfish. Wiglaf, son of Weohstan, spoke. Often when the man follows his own will, many a hurt. This happens to us. Nothing we advised could ever convince the prince we loved, our land's guardian, not to vex a custodian of the gold. Let him lie where he was long accustomed. Look there under the earth until the end of the world. He held to his high destiny. The hoard is laid bare, but of a grave cost. It's too cruel a fate that forced the king to that encounter. I have been in silence, he did everything amassed in the vault. I managed to enter, although no great welcome awaited me under the earth wall. I quickly gathered up a huge pile of priceless treasures, handpicked from the hoard, and carried them here, where the king could see him. He was still himself, alive, aware, and in spite of his weakness, he had many requests. He wanted me to greet you, and order the building of a barrow that would crown the site of his pyre, serve as his memorial, in a commanding position, since of all men to have lived and thrived and lorded it on the earth, his worth and due as a warrior were the greatest. Now let us again go quickly and feast our eyes on an amazing fortune heaped under the wall. I'll show the way and take you close to the coffers packed with rings and bars of gold. Let a pyre be made and got ready quickly when we come out, and then let us bring the body of our Lord, the man we loved, to where he will lodge for a long time in the care of the Almighty. Then Weohstan's son, stalwart to the end, had orders given to owners of dwellings, many people of importance in the land, to fetch wood from far and wide for the good man's pyre. Now shall flame consume our leader in battle. The blaze darkened round him who stood his ground in still hail. When the arrow storm shot from bowstrings pelted the shield wall, the shaft hit home, feather-fledged it finned the barb in flight. Next, the wise son of Weohstan called from among the king's thanes a group of 7. He selected the best and entered with them. The 8th of their number, under the god-cursed roof, one raised a lighted torch and led the way. No lots were cast for who should loot the hoard, for it was obvious to them that every bit of it lay unprotected within the vault, there for the taking. It was no trouble to hurry to work and haul out the precious shore. They pitched a dragon over the cliff top, let tides flow and backwash take the treasure minder. Then coiled gold was loaded on a cart in great abundance, and the grey-haired leader, the prince on his bear, borne to her own ness. The Geat people built a pyre for Beowulf, stacked and decked it until it stood foursquare, hung with helmets, heavy war shields, and shining armor, just as he had ordered. Then his warriors laid him in the middle of it, mourning of a lord far famed and beloved. On a height they kindled the hugest of all funeral pyres. Fumes of wood smoke billowed darkly up. The blaze roared and drowned out their weeping. Wind died down, and flames wrought havoc in the hot bone house, burning it to the core. They were disconsolate and wailed aloud for their lords to cease. The Geat woman too sang out in grief, with hair bound up. She unburdened herself with her worst fears. A wild litany of nightmare and lament. Her nation invaded, enemies on the rampage, bodies in piles, slavery and abasement. Heaven swallowed the smoke. Then the Geat people began to construct a mound on a headland, high and imposing, a marker that sailors could see from far away, and in 10 days they had done the work. It was their hero's memorial that remained from the fire. They housed inside it behind a wall, as worthy of him was as their workship could make it, and they buried torques in the barrow and jewels and a trove of such things as trespassing men had once dared to drag from the hoard. They let the ground keep that ancestral treasure, gold under gravel, gone to earth, as useless to men now as it ever was. And 12 warriors rode around the tomb, chieftains' sons, champions in battle, all of them distraught, chanting in dirges, mourning his loss as a man and a king. They extolled his heroic nature and exploits and gave thanks for his greatness, which was the proper thing, for man should praise a prince for whom he holds dear and cherishes memory when that moment comes, when he has to be convoyed from his bodily home. So the Geat people, his hearth companions, sorrowed for the lord who had been laid low. They said that of all the kings upon the earth, he was the man most gracious and fair-minded, kindest to his people, and keenest to win fame. Thus ends Beowulf by Seamus Heaney, bilingual edition. Thank you for listening.